Chapter 2201. Phagocytosis versus Death Spirit. All of you, step back. We'll talk after I kill this kid, Death Spirit said and leaped onto the bone python's head. Chen Changxing, Yu Shihui, and the others retreated with reverence in their eyes. They didn't dare to underestimate this bone python. This bone python was condensed from the power of faith. Its destructive power was extremely terrifying. Even in the outside world, it was comparable to a cultivator of the void sky 8th step. Of course, the material in the bone world was much tougher than the outside world. A battle between void sky 8th step cultivators would definitely be earth-shattering in the outside world, but in the bone world, which was as tough as a prison, it was impossible to have the same power as the outside world. The bone python roared and swung its huge tail. It shot toward Zhuan like an arrow leaving the bow. Its speed was so fast that Chen Changxing and the others could only see a white shadow. Zhuan coldly snorted and grabbed with both hands. Immediately, two divine swords made of lightning and fire energy condensed. Zhuan stomped his right foot and met the attack fearlessly. His two swords danced, emitting a blazing light. Bang, bang, bang. In just an instant, Zhuan and the bone python collided. Zhuan's two swords danced at an extremely fast speed, slashing out again and again. However, what shocked Zhuan was that the bone python's head was extremely hard. The extreme Dao divine sword in his hand could only leave a slight mark on it. The instant Zhuan chopped down on the bone python's head, the bone python's huge tail was like a whip as it fiercely lashed out, creating a whistling sound in the air. Zhuan threw out the extreme Dao divine sword with his right hand, causing the trajectory of the bone python's tail to deviate by quite a bit. It brushed past Zhuan's body. The Death Spirit, who was standing on the bone python's head, growled. He pointed the bone staff in his hand and a green fireball shot towards Chen Changxing at an extremely fast speed. However, did not panic. He immediately summoned the phagocytosis that Devourer King had given him. The black imperial jade seal flew out of Zhuan's hand, and when the terrifying green fireball hit the imperial jade seal, the fireball was immediately absorbed by the imperial jade seal. What is this? The undead stared at the phagocytosis summoned by Zhuan in horror. He could sense a familiar and terrifying aura from the phagocytosis. Don't you recognize me? For so many years, you've used the sealed land to obtain many benefits from this king. Today, this king will calculate everything with you. King Shi's cold voice came from the phagocytosis. Then, the black phagocytosis grew bigger and bigger. In just a blink of an eye, it grew from the size of a palm to dozens of feet tall, occupying 2/3 of the cave. Chen Changxing and the others were dumbfounded. They had no choice but to withdraw from the cave. They could sense the terrifying aura from the imperial jade seal. Death Spirit's eyes were gloomy. He turned to Zhuan and said coldly, "You met that person on the path of corpses?" Zhuan did not answer. Instead, it was King Shi inside the phagocytosis who laughed and said, "That's right. I led him here. You coward, other than using the seal to absorb my vitality, what else can you do?" Rumble. The black phagocytosis smashed down without any warning. It was like a small hill in front of Death Spirit. Death Spirit stomped his right foot and jumped down from the bone python's head. The bone python flew out, intending to block the phagocytosis. Unfortunately, the moment the bone python touched the phagocytosis, it let out a miserable cry. Its huge body collapsed inch by inch, turning into countless bone fragments. Fire shield. Undead suddenly raised his bone staff, and streams of faith power were transmitted into the bone staff. Soon after, the eyes of the skull at the top of the bone staff became glossy green, and it became extremely strange. Then, green flames gushed out from the eyes of the skull at the top of the bone staff. It was like a sea of fire, sweeping in front of Death Spirit and forming a solid wall of fire. "You'd better not force me. You can restrict divine power here, but you can't restrict the power of faith. I know you're afraid of this power. If you retreat now, we won't interfere in each other's business," Death Spirit said, his forehead covered in cold sweat. "Just with trash like you?" King Shi's disdainful laughter came from the phagocytosis. The phagocytosis's power increased by a lot. Gotcha. As the phagocytosis's power increased, the fire shield in front of Death Spirit was unable to withstand it. Countless cracks appeared on its surface, as if it would shatter at any moment. After 5 breaths, the fire shield was broken. Zhuowen, who had retreated from the battle, heard Death Spirit's ferocious scream. "You forced me. Do you think I don't have a backup plan? Today, I'll show you my backup plan." Boom. As soon as Death Spirit finished talking, the entire karst cave shook hard. Countless rocks fell from the ceiling, hitting the ground like raindrops. When the dust settled, Yuan found that there was a big hole above the karst cave. Death Spirit and phagocytosis weren't in the cave. Apparently, they had left through that big hole. Jun immediately dashed to the end of the karst cave where the statues were. His eyes sparkled as he destroyed the last statue. He took out the small temple and collected all the souls inside. After that, Yuan returned to the center of the karst cave. He jumped up and jumped out of the hole in the sky. At this moment, the entire Bone Halberd tribe was in chaos. The battle between Death Spirit and phagocytosis was getting more and more terrifying. The entire Bone Halberd tribe was filled with energy fluctuations. Most of the caves were destroyed, and the people inside were dead or injured. Yuan dashed out of the karst cave. He immediately stopped and stared at the sky. He saw that in the sky above the Bone Halberd tribe, a huge formation had appeared out of nowhere. Countless ripples appeared on the surface of the formation, which looked ferocious and terrifying. At the same time, terrifying attacks were launched from every corner of the formation. The target was the phagocytosis, who was fighting with Death Spirit. Originally, phagocytosis's power was enough to suppress Death Spirit. However, at this moment, Death Spirit was using the formation of the Bone Halberd tribe to fight against phagocytosis. Phagocytosis didn't have much of an advantage. Yuan also noticed that phagocytosis seemed to be afraid of Death Spirit's faith power. Although it seemed to be fighting with Death Spirit fiercely, Yuan could see that phagocytosis seemed to be avoiding Death Spirit on purpose. "Junior, lend me a hand." Suddenly, Devourer King's voice echoed in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen's eyes flickered, but he didn't rush forward immediately. Instead, he transmitted his voice. "Senior, wait a moment. I need to refine the death energy you gave me. Otherwise, I can't take down Death Spirit." After that, Yuan randomly chose a cave. At the same time, he took out 9 Beast Bone Array discs and set up a Level 7 defensive formation. With the power of the Level 7 defensive formation, it was enough to resist the shockwaves from the battle between phagocytosis and Death Spirit. Zhuowen found an excuse because he really wasn't Death Spirit's opponent. After all, if Death Spirit didn't use the 9-cycle Samsara formation, Yuan could only fight with him. Now that he had the 9-cycle Samsara formation, Zhuowen definitely wasn't his opponent. Chapter 2202. Refining the Death Aura. That little bastard. The Devourer King's exasperated voice came from the phagocytosis. He knew that Zhuowen didn't trust him at all. Si Ling sighed in his heart. It was already difficult for him to deal with the phagocytosis. If Zhuowen joined the battle, he might really be defeated. However, Si Ling was still on guard. He was afraid that Zhuowen and the Devourer King were just acting to confuse him. If Zhuowen suddenly attacked, it would be too late for him to cry. Inside the cave, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He summoned the Thunderfire sword and ordered, "Xiaohei, pay attention to the battle outside. If there's any movement, tell me immediately." Xiaohei sat on the sword's hilt. She knew the importance of the situation. She nodded and flew to the entrance of the cave, silently watching the battle outside. Zhuowen took out a black cube. He opened his mouth and spat out the extreme fire, which wrapped around the black cube. He was ready to refine the death aura inside the black cube. With Zhuowen's experience, he could see that the death aura and the phagocytosis weren't that different in strength. It would be difficult to determine the winner in a short time. Thus, he still had a lot of time to refine the death aura. Time passed slowly. The battle in the Bone Halberd tribe was getting fiercer and fiercer. The commotion was getting bigger and bigger. The entire bone world was affected. Many creatures in the bone world were alarmed by the terrifying commotion. Most of the cultivators squatted in the tribe, trembling and praying. There were also some brave ones who followed the commotion to the Bone Halberd tribe. However, no one dared to approach the tribe. 3 days later, the Bone Halberd tribe was completely in ruins. More than 80% of the tribesmen were killed. The rest of the tribesmen escaped quickly and avoided the disaster. Of course, in the Bone Halberd tribe, the only place that wasn't in ruins was Zhuowen's cave. Zhuowen had set up a level 7 defensive array outside the cave, and the location was at the edge of the Bone Halberd tribe. Therefore, although the battle between the undead and the phagocytosis was terrifying, it wasn't to the extent that it would affect Zhuowen. Motherfucker, there's actually such a terrifying guy in the bone world. I'm afraid that Wu Ling's strength is about the same as Wu Qing's, or maybe even stronger. Outside the cave, Xiao He gazed numbly at the ripples that appeared on the surface of the Grand Formation, and she couldn't help but click her tongue in wonder as she looked at the specter and phagocytosis that were still fighting above. I have the 9-cycle reincarnation formation. You can't take me down. I think you know better than I do. You'd better back off. With a wave of the necromancer's bone staff, the green flames transformed into a huge dragon, blasting the oncoming phagocytosis back. Old fart, remove this 9-cycle reincarnation formation for me, and I'll back off. Otherwise, I won't rest until you're dead. Also, don't forget about that Zhuowen. As long as he comes out of seclusion, your time of death will come. The phagocytosis floated in the air, and his voice was filled with gloom. The undead sneered and said, "That Zhuowen isn't as good as you think. I'm afraid that he's planning for both sides to suffer. I don't think you're a fool. It's best for you to see the facts clearly." The phagocytosis turned a deaf ear to the undead's words, but his heart was filled with anger. Obviously, he was also somewhat suspicious of Zhuowen's goal. Old fart, this king will not rest until you're dead. Die for me. The devouring king knew that he had no other choice. If he let the undead go this time, the undead would become stronger and stronger in the future. Moreover, the undead would become more vigilant and wouldn't give him a chance to escape. Therefore, he had to kill the undead this time, even if he had to pay a huge price. Rumble. The phagocytosis was wrapped in a terrifying devouring power. Like a dark cloud pressing down on a mountain, it suddenly blasted towards the undead. The undead's face was ugly, but his heart was filled with helplessness. He naturally knew what the devouring king was thinking. This time, the devouring king had relied on Zhuowen to come out. How could he retreat so easily? Inside the cave, Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the extreme fire energy was absorbed into his sleeve. However, his brows slowly creased as he looked at the undamaged death qi in his hand. For 3 days and 3 nights, Zhuowen had used the extreme fire energy, but he couldn't refine the death qi completely. Why is this death qi so difficult to refine? Could it be that there's something wrong with the refining method? Zhuowen slightly creased his brows as he silently looked at the undamaged black cube in his hand. Zhuowen's expression suddenly changed, and he immediately took out the small temple that housed the souls from his spirit ring. At this moment, the power of faith in the small temple was extremely dense. When Zhuowen's consciousness entered the small temple, he could clearly see countless souls kneeling on the ground and praying devoutly. What a powerful power of faith! I never thought that this small temple would actually gather so much power of faith in such a short period of time. This speed is much faster than the undead's method. Zhuowen murmured. He couldn't help but recall Han Yan's words. The power of faith was bidirectional. If the power of faith was forcefully obtained, not only would it not be pure, but the speed would also be very slow. However, Zhuowen had saved the souls that had been tortured by the undead and obtained their sincere devotion. Not only was the power of faith of the highest quality, but the speed of accumulation was also much faster than the undead's. Although the current power of faith was insignificant compared to the undead's power of faith, Zhuowen knew that it wouldn't take too long for him to reach the same level as the undead if he continued to accumulate it at this speed. Of course, Zhuowen didn't know how to use the power of faith. However, energy was ultimately different from divine power. The way to use the power of faith shouldn't be too different. The undead said that the Devourer King seemed to be afraid of the power of faith. I wonder if the power of faith would be of any help in refining the death qi? Zhuowen murmured to himself. His eyes grew brighter and brighter. Soon after, he held the small temple in his hand. With a thought, a dense milky white energy gushed out of the small temple. This milky white energy was the power of faith. When the power of faith completely enveloped the black cube, Yuan was pleasantly surprised to find that the deathly chi in the black cube finally moved. It kept rolling as if it was facing a great enemy. Yuan knew that the power of faith would be of great use in refining the death chi. Hence, he immediately increased the output of the power of faith. Sizzle, 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 sizzle. Yuan discovered that the deathly chi in the black cube began to struggle. It broke free from the black cube as if it wanted to escape. However, how could Yuan allow the deathly chi to escape? He immediately controlled the power of faith to intercept the deathly chi. At the same time, Yuan used the power of faith to create white flames that constantly roasted the deathly chi. The deathly chi had no way out. It could only resist the white flames created by the power of faith. Chapter 2203. 9 Reincarnations. Yuan spent a day and a night to finally refine 1/10 of the deathly aura into an incomparably pitch-black fine needle. The death chi was very powerful, and Yuan didn't have much of it in his body. Therefore, in order to conserve the death chi, he naturally refined smaller objects like the needle. Although the power of faith could restrain the death chi was extraordinary. It would take some time to completely refine the death chi. Refining 1/10 of it was already very fast. Kid, those two fellows are fighting their way to your place. Yuan had just refined 1/10 of the death chi and was about to continue refining it when Xiao He rushed over from the cave entrance. He couldn't help but shout. Yuan narrowed his eyes. He took a step forward with his right foot and arrived at the cave entrance. At the same time, terrifying vibrations could be clearly heard coming from his surroundings. Yuan raised his head to look at the sky and immediately saw undead and the phagocytosis fighting unceasingly. They were slowly moving towards him, and before long, they were above the cave he was in. Boom, boom, boom. The aftermath of the battle was extremely terrifying. When it hit the array, dense ripples appeared. Yuan's expression changed slightly. He knew that the Devourer King and undead were doing this on purpose. The Devourer King originally wanted Yuan to help him, but now Yuan had hidden himself to refine the death chi. Obviously, the Devourer King wanted to use this method to express his dissatisfaction. As for undead's goal, it was obvious that he wanted Yuan to die. It would be best if he died from the aftermath of their battle. Yuan's mouth was full of coldness. Neither of those two old fellows were good people, but he, Yuan, wasn't someone who could be bullied easily. Gotcha. Finally, a clear cracking sound rang out. The level 7 formation that Yuan was in immediately shattered. Yuan kicked off with his right foot and immediately left the cave that had been reduced to ruins in the next moment. Junior, you should be almost done refining the death chi, right? Are you going to help me now? Yuan could hear the killing intent in his voice. That's only natural. It's all thanks to Senior for helping me block this old fart for so long. Thus, Junior was able to refine a portion of the death chi, just enough to deal with this old fart. Yuan sent a sound transmission, and with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed towards the battlefield of the undead and the phagocytosis. The moment he rushed out, Yuan swung his hands, and immediately threw out 2 extreme Dao divine swords towards the undead. The undead's eyes were gloomy. He raised his bone staff, and countless bones gathered in front of him, forming an airtight bone shield, blocking the 2 extreme Dao divine swords. Bang! However, when the undead was blocking the extreme Dao divine sword, the phagocytosis drilled through the air. The phagocytosis suddenly shrank and turned into a black speck of light. It shot out and headed straight for the dead spirit's heart. Poochie! The black speck of light was too fast. The undead spirit didn't even have time to react before the speck of light came out from his back, bringing with it a strand of black blood. The undead suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Just as he was about to turn around, Yuan had already appeared in front of the undead spirit. An extreme Dao divine sword condensed in his hand once again, and he unceremoniously slashed towards the undead spirit's neck. Poochie! The extreme Tao divine sword smoothly sliced through the undead spirit's neck, bringing with it a stream of blood and a head that soared into the sky. On the other hand, Nguyen passed by the undead spirit's corpse and steadily landed not far away. Yun was a little surprised. He never thought that he would be able to get rid of the undead spirit so easily. Originally, he thought that he would need to use the needles formed from the death chi, but now it seemed that there was no need at all. "Kid, be careful. This old fart won't die so easily." The voice of the devouring king quietly sounded in Zhuowen's mind, and soon after, an ominous premonition arose in Zhuowen's heart. Boom! A terrifying green flaming character surged out from beneath Zhuowen's feet, enveloping Zhuowen's entire body within, instantly submerging his figure. Phagocytosis, on the other hand, hurriedly retreated as he stared at the undead spirit, who was standing up again, with fear in his eyes. "I really didn't expect that this 9 reincarnation formation would actually have a function that I don't know about." Phagocytosis stared at the undead spirit in front of him with a fearful expression and said coldly. The undead spirit turned its head and looked indifferently at Zhuowen, who was submerged in the green flames. Then, it looked at Phagocytosis and said, "You only know that the 9 reincarnation formation absorbs your life force to extend my life and use illusions. You don't know the true use of the 9 reincarnation formation. In this formation, there are 9 reincarnations for those who set up the formation. In other words, in this 9 reincarnation formation, I have 9 chances to be reincarnated. Within these 9 chances, I can kill you several times. Originally, I didn't want to expose the function of this 9 reincarnation formation. Unfortunately, you forced me into this state. Zhuowen deserved to die, and you don't have to leave. Today, I will leave you, Phagocytosis, behind and erase the divine sense you left here." As he spoke, the undead spirit laughed sinisterly. His sleeves and beard fluttered without wind as he stomped his bone staff on the ground. Instantly, countless bone fragments surrounded his body, forming a sturdy bone coat. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the bone coat formed, huge bone spikes suddenly shot out from the ground within the Bone Halberd tribe's territory. The bone spikes shot into the sky, each one no less than a towering tree. The Phagocytosis snorted coldly, but he kept dodging the bone spikes that shot out from the ground. He was in a difficult situation. While the Phagocytosis was dodging the bone spikes, the undead spirit moved again. He didn't know when he had appeared above the undead spirit. The bone staff in his hand smashed mercilessly on the Phagocytosis, smashing the Phagocytosis to the ground. However, the Phagocytosis wasn't simple. He roared and spewed out a terrifying black fog. "This king has miscalculated. I didn't expect you to have such a trick up your sleeve. But don't be complacent. Do you think this king doesn't have a backup plan? If that's the case, then you are gravely mistaken." The black fog grew bigger and bigger, covering the entire Bone Halberd tribe. If it weren't for the 9 reincarnation formation blocking the Bone Halberd tribe's territory, the black fog would have spread even wider. The undead spirit frowned and couldn't help but retreat to the edge of the Bone Halberd tribe. He raised his bone staff and green flames spread out in a radius of dozens of zhang to prevent the black fog from invading. Boom! All of a sudden, a gigantic black claw emerged from the black mist in front of him. The surface of this black claw was covered with distinct layers of scales, looking exceptionally ferocious and terrifying. Rumble! The black claw slammed into the green flames in front of the undead spirit and extinguished the green flames in an instant. Then the undead spirit was caught in the claw. Just as the undead spirit was about to speak, the claw squeezed and the undead spirit was crushed into pieces. "Since you have 9 lives, this king will kill you 9 times. The Devourer King's furious voice came from the black fog. This was the final trump card he had left on the Phagocytosis. It was used to increase the power of the seal on the Phagocytosis. In other words, the Devourer King had spent countless years refining 8,999 seals. In this short period of time, he might reseal all of them to obtain more power. After this use, the Phagocytosis seals would be restored to 9,999 seals. The Devourer King would have to spend countless years to refine the seals on the Phagocytosis. Moreover, it would take an extremely long time to refine the seals to such a degree. Moreover, this secret technique would cause great damage to the divine consciousness that the Devourer King had left on the phagocytosis. Chapter 2204. Undead Fall. Bang, 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 bang. The power Devourer King gained from sacrificing the layers of restrictions on the phagocytosis was too great. The terrifying Black Claw continued to attack Undead Fall, killing him again and again. When Undead Fall was killed for the 8th time and was about to be resurrected, the Black Claw slammed down again. Undead Fall screamed. As soon as he was resurrected, he immediately took out the bone staff. The bone staff suddenly exploded, and boundless green flames rushed out from it, instantly turning into a huge sea of fire. The sea of fire was too terrifying. The high temperature released caused the surrounding space to distort. When the Black Claw slammed into the sea of fire, its irresistible momentum came to a halt. Due to the terrifying temperature of the sea of fire, the surface of the Black Claw showed signs of being burnt. The ink-black scales curled up, looking extremely miserable. If one were to look carefully, the Black Claw was gradually dimming. It was obvious that the Black Claw was reaching its limit. Undead Fall also noticed this. His eyes flickered as he hastily retreated dozens of steps, trying to get as far away from the Black Claw as possible. Inside the phagocytosis, Devourer King let out an unwilling roar. He was only one step away from annihilating Undead Fall. Was he going to fail at the last step? Devourer King was very clear about his own situation. The restrictions on the phagocytosis were about to be completely sealed, and the powerful Black Claw was about to collapse. Devourer King originally planned to kill Undead Fall 9 times. However, Undead Fall suddenly sacrificed the bone staff in exchange for great power, blocking the final attack of the phagocytosis. Devourer King knew that Undead Fall's consciousness was about to collapse when the restrictions on the phagocytosis were completely sealed. However, he helplessly discovered that the Black Claw couldn't escape from the sea of fire. Hee, you didn't manage to kill me in the end. You won't have the chance to come out in the future. Undead Fall sighed in relief when he saw the Black Claw trapped in the sea of fire. At the same time, he felt pain in his heart. Inside the bone staff was the source of the power of the undead. It contained most of the power of faith that the undead had collected in the skeleton world for so many years. Now, in order to block the Black Claw, he released all the faith power in the bone staff. The faith power in his body could be said to be very little, and his strength was reduced by more than half. However, being able to block the killing intent of the Devourer King, Undead felt that it was all worth it. At the same time, after this incident, he made up his mind to never open the corpse heavenly road again. After all, if another person like Juon were to enter the Devouring King and bring out even more powerful treasures for him, he would really be done for. Poochie. Just when Death's spirit fell into deep thought, a trace of a bad premonition arose in his heart, and then he suddenly turned around and retreated swiftly. The undead spirit's reaction could not be said to be slow, but he was still a step too slow. A divine sword that was entwined with lightning and fire energy quietly flew out, and then the undead spirit's right arm, which was covered in blood, was suddenly thrown out. Clutching his severed arm, the undead looked at the young man who had appeared behind him in horror, and couldn't help but ask, "You're not dead." The young man who appeared in front of the undead was none other than Juon. When the undead resurrected for the first time, he immediately used the green flames to attack Juon, submerging Juon in flames. In the undead's view, Juon didn't show any signs of struggling or coming out, so he thought that this kid was dead for sure, so he didn't pay much attention to him. Juon was indeed attacked by the green flames, but no matter how strong the green flames were, they couldn't be stronger than the extreme flame. At that time, the moment Juon was wrapped in the green flames, he summoned the extreme flame to protect himself, but he wasn't in a hurry to get out. Instead, he silently waited for an opportunity. Obviously, the eruption of the phagocytosis had created an opportunity for Juon. Originally, with the phagocytosis being so powerful, Juon thought that he didn't need to take action, so he had been hiding. When the undead used the bone staff to block the Black Claw, Juon knew that his chance had come. That was why the current scene was happening. "Junior, well done. Most of the undead strength is in the bone staff. Now that the bone staff has been destroyed, he has less than 1/10 of his strength left. Kill him. Phagocytosis, who was trapped in the green flames, naturally saw this scene, and the Devourer King's divine sense that had been left on it immediately said in ecstasy. Dead Spirit's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He hurriedly said, "Zhuowen, listen to me. I don't know why you want to help the king of this sealed land, but if you kill me, I think you will definitely regret it. As long as you kill me, the 9-cycle samsara formation will be completely destroyed. The seal of this sealed land is already severely damaged due to the passage of time. As long as the 9-cycle samsara formation is destroyed, the king might be able to break out of the seal. At that time, do you think the king will really give you benefits and not kill you?" The Devourer King's exasperated voice came from the phagocytosis. "Undead, you're bullshitting. This little guy isn't a human, he's from the same race as me. I'm not as sinister and cunning as you humans. After making a promise, you turn your back on me." Undead was startled. He looked at Zhuowen strangely. Just as Zhuowen was about to make his move, Undead suddenly transmitted a message to Zhuowen. "If you're from the same race as this king, you'll be in even more danger. If you kill me, you'll be finished as well. If you don't believe me, you can kill me." Zhuowen, who was surging with killing intent, slowly narrowed his eyes. He was a little hesitant about whether this undead was just stalling for time. "Junior, if you kill this undead, you'll have made a great contribution. As long as this king can do it, I will definitely do it for you. As long as you kill this old fart." The Devourer King's anxious voice immediately came from the phagocytosis. It seemed like he couldn't wait for Zhuowen to kill Undead immediately. Zhuowen looked at Undead, then at the phagocytosis trapped in the green flames not far away. With a stomp of his right foot, he rushed towards Undead. Undead's pupils shrunk. He hurriedly transmitted a message. "Kid, are you crazy? Don't you want to know why you're in danger?" "Not interested." As soon as Zhuowen said this, the divine sword in his hand suddenly shot out, piercing through Death Spirit's body. At the same time, Zhuowen's right hand secretly touched Death Spirit's forehead, secretly extracting Death Spirit's soul and storing it in the small temple in his spirit ring. Chapter 2205. Array Diagram. Good job, Junior. You've done well. Now, come over here and help me leave this green sea of fire. This sea of fire is too terrifying. "I can't leave for a while," said the Devouring King. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. This green sea of fire was a powerful attack created by the undead spirit's accumulated faith power. Even the terrifying Black Claw was trapped inside. Was he, Zhuowen, courting death by going in? What? You're not willing? Don't worry. As long as you enter, use your devouring power to enter the phagocytosis. This king will have the ability to break out of this green sea of fire, said the Devouring King unhappily. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "Senior, this sea of fire is too terrifying. This junior doesn't dare to take the risk." The Devouring King fell silent and sighed. "It's been hard on you. Since that's the case, you can wait outside and see if this king can rely on himself to break out of this sea of fire." After saying that, the Devouring King didn't say anything else. Instead, he controlled the Black Claw to resist the surrounding sea of fire, as if he was trying to find a way out. Zhuowen watched silently for a while. With his eyesight, he knew that the sea of fire would dissipate after a period of time. However, whether the Devouring King's divine sense could last until then was unknown. This sea of fire was too terrifying. Zhuowen didn't have any close relationship with the Devouring King. At most, they were partners. He wouldn't risk his life for this. Zhuowen no longer paid attention to the struggling phagocytosis. Instead, he looked at the undead spirit's cave with a burning gaze. Zhuowen had never seen this 9 revolving samsara array in the outside world. Clearly, it was created by the undead spirit in the bone world. Especially the powerful effect of the 9 revolving samsara array. Zhuowen was really envious of it. If he could set up this 9 revolving samsara array in his own force in the future, then he would be like the undead spirit in this 9 revolving samsara array. He would have 9 chances to reincarnate. It could be said that he couldn't be killed. He knew that the undead spirit would definitely keep such a precious array. He had to find the original copy of this 9 revolving samsara array. Thinking of this, Yuan rushed into the cave where the undead lived. Because the battle between the undead and the phagocytosis was too fierce, the entire Bone Halberd tribe had turned into ruins, and the cave where the undead lived was no exception. Zhuowen released his consciousness and continued to search. He knew that for something as precious as the original draft of the 9 Revolutions Samsara formation, the undead must have hidden it very deeply. It would not be destroyed so easily. After searching through the ruins for nearly 2 hours, Yuan suddenly exclaimed in surprise and stopped in front of the shattered throne. Zhuowen was no stranger to this throne. It was the throne that the undead sat on. The reason why Zhuowen paid attention to the throne was mainly because the throne had only cracked and not turned into dust. Logically speaking, no matter how sturdy the throne was, it should have been shattered into powder by the terrifying shockwaves from the battle between the undead and the phagocytosis. But now, the throne had only cracked, and it hadn't shattered into powder at all. Zhuowen carefully observed the throne and found that there were traces of restrictions around the throne. A mere throne actually had restrictions placed around it. From this, it could be seen that there must be something unusual hidden inside. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took out the throne and carefully scanned the throne with his divine sense. Finally, he found an empty space in between the cushions below the throne. Smashing the cushion, Zhuowen found a jade-colored brocade box hidden inside. Opening the brocade box, a sheepskin blueprint was quietly placed inside. Opening it, Zhuowen's eyes suddenly lit up. Because this blueprint recorded the principle of the 9 revolving samsara formation. It was said that this 9 revolving samsara formation was not particularly complete. It was only a peak tier 8 array. It was said that if this 9 revolving samsara formation was completely perfected, it would not be a peak tier 8 array, but a tier 9 array. At the back of the blueprint, there was a paragraph written by the undead. The general meaning was that he was unable to perfect this 9 revolving samsara formation because this 9 revolving samsara formation was not created by the undead himself. It was said that the 9 revolving samsara formation was obtained by the undead in a secret realm in the starry sky. The blueprint he obtained at that time recorded that the 9 revolving samsara formation was badly damaged. Fortunately, the undead's level of array Dao was very high, and he was also very patient. After tens of thousands of years of research, he finally perfected the 9 revolving samsara formation by more than 90%. But even with his level, he was unable to perfect the remaining 10%. But even if the 9 revolving samsara formation was not perfect, its power was still terrifying. This could be seen from the way the undead used the 9 revolving samsara formation to fight the phagocytosis. Solemnly putting away the blueprint, Yuan was extremely excited. He knew that the 9 revolving samsara formation would be of great help to the Ryuka. It was absolutely beyond imagination. Yuan stood in the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. Looking around, he discovered that the Bone Halberd tribe was already empty. That old bastard Qin Changxing escaped rather quickly, but no matter how fast he was, it was useless. I had my eyes on that old man long ago. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the mountain range in the north. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he disappeared into the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. Previously, when he was fighting the undead, he had deliberately paid attention to Qin Changxing's whereabouts. Now, he naturally knew the direction Qin Changxing had fled in. On the road between the mountain ranges in the north, a group of people were fleeing. These were the people who had escaped from the Bone Halberd tribe. The 2 people at the front were a man and a woman. Moreover, this man and woman were not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. They were Qin Changxing and Yu Shihui. I just heard the chief scream. Lord Qin, do you think the chief will be all right? Yu Shihui was out of her wits. She couldn't help but look at Qin Changxing. She knew that Qin Changxing had always been highly regarded by the undead, so she couldn't help but ask at this moment. Qin Changxing's gaze was gloomy. He had a bad premonition in his heart. He had clearly heard the undead screams from before. He knew that even if the undead hadn't died, he would most likely be in danger. Right now, we can't interfere at all. We must retreat first. As the saying goes, where there is life, there is hope. As long as we don't die, we will definitely avenge Master in the future. Chen Changsheng's words were impassioned, but he had already made up his mind. He would leave the Bone Halberd tribe and never return. He was very clear that as long as Zhuan didn't die, if he was found he would definitely die. The undead was most likely in danger. He didn't dare to face Zhuan at all. Lord Chen is right. Where there is life, there is hope. In the future, we will definitely kill our way back. Yu Xiaohui also nodded. The others naturally followed the two's lead. They didn't have any objections at all. What a good saying. Where there is life, there is hope. These words are correct, but are you sure you can leave today? Suddenly, an untimely voice slowly came from the front. Chen Changsheng and the others immediately trembled. Their entire bodies stiffened as they looked forward. At the end of the road, a black-clothed youth with a long sword on his back was slowly walking over. Wasn't this the black-clothed Zhuan? Then, how did you find this place? Chen Changsheng was greatly shocked. He looked at Zhuan, who was slowly walking over, the corners of his mouth constantly trembling. Zhuan, however, sneered and said, "Do I need to find you? What do you want? Do you want to kill us?" Yu Xiaohui suddenly spoke. Then, however, shook his head. He pointed at Chen Changsheng and said, "I can let you live, but the premise is that Chen Changsheng kneels down, crawls to me, and then swears to become Zhuowen's servant." Chapter 2206. Servant, you want me to kneel down? Chen Changsheng's face paled and his voice became increasingly low. Not only do you have to kneel down, you have to crawl over and apologize to me. Zhuowen indifferently added. Master Chen, you have to agree to Zhuowen's request. Otherwise, we will all die. Yu Xiaohui suddenly spoke. Chen Changsheng turned his head and looked at Yu Xiaohui in disbelief. All along, Yu Xiaohui had treated him with reverence and respect. Now, with a single sentence from Zhuan, Yu Xiaohui immediately revealed her true colors. That's right, for us, you should kneel down and beg Zhuan for mercy. Master Zhuowen didn't say that he wants you to die. He only wants you to apologize and become his servant. What are you hesitating for? The rest of the people also began to clamor. In a moment, Chen Changsheng was pushed to the ground by the crowd. His face was incomparably pale. He wanted to resist, but found that he didn't have the slightest bit of Shin Qi in his body. In the past, these people were only ants in his eyes. Now, it was difficult for two fists to fight against four hands. Zhuan silently looked at all of this. The killing intent in his eyes became increasingly dense. He made up his mind that if Chen Changsheng chose to resist because of his dignity, he, Zhuan, would not show any mercy. This Chen Changsheng had repeatedly tried to kill him to silence him. Zhuan wouldn't have any pity for him. Just as Zhuan was about to act, Chen Changsheng suddenly knelt on the ground. Then he lowered his head and crawled toward Zhuan. Finally, he crawled toward Zhuowen's feet and said in a low voice, Chen Changsheng had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me, Master. Zhuowen's gaze froze. He didn't expect Chen Changsheng to so straightforwardly beg for mercy. This was out of his expectations. If he were to think about it from Chen Changsheng's perspective, Zhuowen wouldn't be so surprised. How could a cultivator who could cultivate to Chen Changsheng's level be easy to deal with? They definitely placed cultivation as their #1 priority. They pursued the highest level. Having cultivated for countless years, Chen Changsheng valued his life more than anyone else. He definitely didn't want to die like this. So what if he became Zhuowen's servant? It was fine as long as he didn't die. After all, if he died, there would be nothing left. If he lived, there was still hope. Even if he had to become Zhuowen's servant, Chen Changsheng didn't want to die a useless death. Master, do you have any other requests? While Zhuan was still in a daze, Chen Changsheng lowered his head and cautiously said. Zhuan waved his hand and formed a seal with his right hand. He pointed at Chen Changsheng's forehead and planted a slave seal in his sea of consciousness. He said calmly, Get up. Since you're my servant now, you can follow me from now on. Although Zhuowen's goal was to kill Chen Changsheng, it was a pity that Chen Changsheng was too sensible. Yes, Master. Chen Changsheng hurriedly got up and respectfully stood behind Zhuan. His attitude was indescribable. Yu Xiaohui and the others saw that Chen Changxing was so sensible and inwardly sighed. They immediately retreated to the side and lowered their heads submissively, not daring to look at Chun. Si Ling is finished. There will be no bone halberd tribe in the future. Scram. Zhuan said coldly. Yu Xiaohui and the others inwardly sighed. They all cupped their hands toward Zhuan and quickly left. Although they were shocked by the news of Si Ling's death, compared to their own lives, this wasn't important. After Yu Xiaohui and the others left, Zhuan turned to look at Chen Changxing. The latter lowered his head submissively, not daring to show any strange expression. Changsheng, I heard you call Si Ling your master. Could it be that Si Ling was once a member of the Heaven and Earth sect? Zhuan asked casually. Chen Changsheng hurriedly said, Master is right. Si Ling's original name was Chen Xuanji. He was the ancestor of the previous generation of the Heaven and Earth sect and also my master. However, because his life was about to end, he stubbornly left the Heaven and Earth sect in order to find a treasure to extend his life. However, he never returned. After I landed here, I found out that he had actually entered a fault in the starry sky and relied on the sealed land to extend his life. Zhuan nodded. Chen Changsheng's words were more or less what he had guessed, so he wasn't too surprised. Zhuan then asked about Si Ling, and Chen Changsheng answered them one by one. Moreover, Zhuan also mentioned the 9-cycle samsara formation. However, Chen Changsheng's face was blank. Clearly, he didn't know much about the 9-cycle samsara formation. Changsheng, what's your cultivation level now? Zhuan stared at Chen Changsheng and asked. Although he had guessed that Chen Changsheng was at the late stage of Void Heaven 8 steps, he wasn't too sure, so he asked. Chen Changsheng hurriedly said, Master, this lowly one is at the late stage of Void Heaven 8 steps. However, compared to Master, this lowly one is really insignificant. Zhuan didn't really care about Chen Changsheng's flattery. Instead, he asked indifferently, Do you know the specific division of Void Heaven 9 steps? I think that since Void Heaven 8 steps is divided into 4 small realms, then Void Heaven 9 steps must have a corresponding division of realms. Chen Changsheng's eyes flashed and he nodded. This lowly one only knows a little about this. Because Void Heaven 9 steps already touches the laws of the heavenly Tao, cultivators of Void Heaven 9 steps are much stronger than those of Void Heaven 8 steps. Void Heaven 9 steps requires one to understand life and death. Back then, I heard my master say that this understanding of life and death requires a sequence. Master died after you, so in the end, it's life and death. Void Heaven 9 steps has 3 small realms, which are divided according to the understanding of life and death. They are respectively the realm of understanding life, the realm of understanding death, and the 2 extremes of life and death. Each small realm is divided into small success, large success, and perfection. Zhuan nodded. As his cultivation continued to approach Void Heaven 9 steps, he could clearly feel that the specific division of Void Heaven 9 steps was different from the other Void Heaven worlds. Originally, he wanted to wait until he dealt with the grievances of the 10 great sects before asking Old Man Wu Qing, but he didn't expect him to fall into the starry sky fault. This Chen Changsheng was the ancestor of Heaven and Earth sect, so he definitely knew no less than Old Man Wu Qing. Now that Chen Changsheng had become his subordinate, he naturally had to make good use of him. Apart from Great Brahma, is there really no other expert of Void Heaven 9 steps in Great Brahma Heaven domain? Zhuan asked again. Chen Changsheng frowned slightly and sighed softly. Great Brahma Heaven domain is ranked last among the 8 heavens. Whether it's the strength of the upper echelons or the overall strength, it's far weaker than the other 7 heavens. Back then, a stunning genius appeared in the far west, Goddess Luotian. Unfortunately, she was killed by Great Brahma. If Great Brahma didn't kill Goddess Luotian and that great battle didn't happen, perhaps the gap between Great Brahma Heaven domain and the other 7 heavens wouldn't be so big. Chapter 2207. Body Seizing Array. What level is Lord Brahma's cultivation at now? Zhuan asked. However, Chen Changsheng shook his head and said, I'm not very sure about this. In my opinion, Great Brahma should still be stuck at the comprehension of Death Realm. However, He possesses the heaven-crushing source of the great Brahma domain and the creation manipulating the heavens. His strength is close to the comprehension of life realm. He's not someone an ordinary ninth-step cultivator can compare to. Zhuan's eyes flashed. He was more and more curious about the heaven-breaking source. It seemed that the heaven-breaking source was indeed powerful. It could allow Lord Brahma, who was only in the enlightenment of death realm, to reach the enlightenment of life realm. Ordinary cultivators at the ninth step of the void sky could be called Heavenly Lord. This meant that they were the top ruler of their heaven realm. Of course, the difference in strength between heavenly masters was huge. The difference between heavenly masters in the comprehension of death stage might not be huge, but the difference between heavenly masters in the comprehension of death stage and heavenly masters in the comprehension of life stage and life and death stage was huge. It could be said that if a enlightenment of life realm heavenly lord wanted to kill a enlightenment of death realm heavenly lord, it would be as easy as flipping a hand. However, the other domains have a lot more ninth-step cultivators than the great Brahma domain. The strongest domain, the Sakyamuni domain, has 10 ninth-step cultivators on the surface. As for whether there are more in secret, I don't know. Qin Changxing added. What about the Huaxia domain? Zhuan thought of the unfathomable Tai Ching and couldn't help but ask. Qin Changxing's gaze was solemn, but he shook his head and said, I'm not very clear about the heavenly region of Huaxia, but I know that the heavenly region of Huaxia is very mysterious and very low-key, but I know that great Brahma is extremely afraid of the heavenly region of Huaxia. It can be seen that the heavenly region of Huaxia is not simple. Zhuan nodded inwardly. With Taiching's personality, he wouldn't act in a high-profile manner. However, this didn't mean that the Huaxia domain was weak. On the contrary, this kind of power that didn't show its strength was what they needed to be wary of. Since Taiching dared to make a bet with Sakyamuni, it was clear that Taiching and Huaxia Tianyuan had the power to face off against Sakyamuni. However, what surprised Zhuan was that from Qin Changxing's words, it seemed that the great Brahma domain was not only the worst, but also the gap between it and the other 7 heavenly domains was huge. In the great Brahma domain, only the ruler of the heaven domain had the 9 steps void sky. On the other hand, the Nadi Shiva domain had 10 heavenly lords on the surface, but they definitely had a few more in the dark. The difference was not small at all. I've heard that one can become a heaven-crushing elite after gathering all 8 heaven-crushing essences. If the great Brahma realm is so weak, why haven't the other heavens attacked it yet? Zhuan asked. Qin Changxing had a strange expression and he said, gathering heaven-crushing essences is only a rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not. As for the other heavens attacking it, it would be a huge blow, and none of them would dare to do so. After all, if one of the heavens attacked another, the other heavens would definitely attack as well. At that time, all 8 heavenly domains would descend into chaos. The rulers of the 8 heavenly domains have already come to an agreement, but I don't know what exactly it is. Zhuan's eyes slowly narrowed upon hearing this, but he sighed softly in his mind. He knew far too little about the 8 heavenly domains. However, only the higher-ups of the 8 heavenly domains would know about this, and he hadn't come into contact with this level of knowledge. After learning that Qin Changxing didn't know much, Zhuan didn't plan on asking any further. He knew that even if he continued to ask, he wouldn't be able to get any more information out of him. You can enter first. Zhuan waved his sleeve, and a green vortex appeared. This was the entrance to the Zhanglan mystery realm. Qin Changxing hesitated for a moment, but he could only grit his teeth and enter. Right now, he was Zhuan's servant. If Zhuan wanted him dead, he wouldn't be able to resist at all. After Qin Changxing left, Zhuan took out 9 beast bone formation plates and quickly set up a powerful defensive formation. After doing all this, he took out the small temple. At this moment, the small temple was filled with the rich power of faith, and the souls inside were basically all living and working peacefully in the small temple. Although this small temple wasn't very big, it contained a small world inside. With Zhuan's current cultivation level, creating a small world suitable for souls to live in wasn't a difficult task. However, there was a soul inside that was unique, and Zhuan wasn't unfamiliar with this soul. It was the soul of the dead spirit. Zhuan waved his hand and grabbed the dead spirit soul. The dead spirit's eyes were as calm as water. When Zhuan secretly grabbed his soul, the dead spirit had already guessed that Zhuan definitely had something to ask him. Now tell me, why do you think that I'm of the same race as that king? Zhuan said indifferently. The dead spirit sneered again and again. Now that I've already become like this, what's the difference between me and death? Now you want to get information out of me? No way, I'd rather take this secret into my coffin than tell you. Zhuan frowned and said indifferently, you should be thanking me. If your soul doesn't die, your body can be reconstructed. And once your soul is destroyed, what's the use of reconstructing your body? You still have a chance. The dead spirit's pupils shrank, but he fell into deep thought. Zhuan was right. If his soul was still there, he could indeed reconstruct his body. Right now, he still had a chance to live. I'll give you 3 breaths of time. After saying that, Zhuan began to count, and the dead spirit's frown deepened. In the end, he sighed and said, I can tell you the reason, but you have to promise me that you absolutely can't kill me, and you have to help me reconstruct my body. Zhuan nodded and swore to the heavenly Tao, I'm willing to swear to the heavenly Tao that as long as you're willing to tell me the truth, once I leave this bone world, I'll help you reconstruct your body. The dead spirit nodded. In this world, who wanted to die? If there was a way to live, no one would be willing to die like this. Can you tell me now? Zhuan looked at the dead spirit and said indifferently. The dead spirit pondered for a moment and said, the reason why I said you're very dangerous is because I felt another formation in the sealed area. That formation wasn't the sealing formation, but another kind of formation. At that time, I was too excited when I discovered the sealed land. In addition, the Great Formation did not have much of an effect on me. Thus, I did not pay much attention to it. However, after thinking about it, I suddenly remembered that the Great Formation was a great formation for possession. Due to the fact that the aura of the Great Possession Formation and the Great Sealing Formation are completely different, I was able to discover it immediately. Furthermore, after a careful investigation, I discovered that the Great Possession Formation was also sealed by the Great Sealing Formation. I believe that you know better than me what this means. Speaking up to here, the dead spirit looked at Zhuan with deep meaning. Zhuan's eyes immediately darkened. How could he not understand the dead spirit's meaning? Since the Possession Grand Array was sealed together with the Sealing Grand Array, it meant that the Possession Grand Array might have been set up in the Sealing Grand Array before the Sealing Grand Array was set up. Or it could be said that the Possession Grand Array was secretly set up after the Devouring King was sealed in the Sealing Grand Array. No matter what it was, Zhuan knew that the Devouring King probably didn't have any good intentions. Of course, the truth of the dead spirit's words was still up for debate. Since the dead spirit said that the sealed area had the aura of the Possession Formation, when Zhuan returned to the Bone Halberd tribe, he would definitely check it out. Chapter 2208. Deceit, Junior, I'm afraid that this king's divine sense won't be able to hold on for much longer. Wait until the Bone Halberd tribe's sea of flames disappears, then bring the phagocytosis to the corpse heavenly road to find me. I've already prepared the entrance for you. As long as you have the phagocytosis, you can enter. The Devourer King's weak voice resounded in Zhuan's mind, but it quickly weakened and eventually disappeared. Zhuan knew that the Devourer King's divine sense that was attached to the phagocytosis had been completely wiped out by the Sea of Flames. Thinking of this, Zhuan stood up and immediately rushed towards the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. When Zhuan arrived at the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe, the green Sea of Flames was still burning fiercely. Zhuan didn't approach it casually. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the periphery and arranged a defensive array, then began to refine the remaining death chi. The death chi he obtained from the seven-headed bone flower was extremely powerful. Zhuan knew that as long as he could successfully refine this death chi, its power would definitely be enough to kill without leaving a trace. However, Zhuan regretted that the thin needles refined from the death chi could only be used once. In other words, after using it once, it couldn't be used again. It could be said that the death chi thin needles were Zhuan's trump card. If used well, he could silently kill experts below the late stage of the Void Sky 8th step. If used at a critical moment, It could even deal a fatal blow to an expert at the peak of the Void Sky 8th step. Zhuan discovered that the effects of refining the power of faith were too good. It was many times better than using the divine flames. He planned to use the power of faith to refine treasures in the future. After 10 days, Zhuan finally refined all the death qi in the black cube. As for the death qi, it had been completely refined into 20 thin needles, which Zhuan hid in his spiritual space as a powerful trump card. After refining the death energy, Zhuan raised his head to look at the sea of fire above the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. He found that the sea of fire was much weaker than before. It should be completely extinguished soon. Zhuan waited for another 3 days before the raging sea of fire in the sky gradually weakened and finally disappeared. Zhuan leaped up. The moment the sea of flames disappeared, he rushed to the phagocytosis's side and grabbed it. At this moment, the phagocytosis's radiance was extremely dim, and its aura was much weaker than before. Zhuan scanned the phagocytosis with his divine senses and discovered that the interior of the phagocytosis was densely packed with restrictions. It was completely different from what Devour King had given him. Zhuan knew that the 8,999 seals that had been refined by Devour King had returned to their original state due to him using a secret technique. The seals inside were now back to 9,999. Moreover, as the Devour King's divine sense disappeared from the phagocytosis, Zhuan knew that the phagocytosis was actually an ownerless object. If Zhuan wanted to refine it now and leave a mark on it, he could do it. However, Zhuan didn't refine the phagocytosis. Instead, he took out the small temple and summoned the soul of the dead spirit. He had to determine if Devouring King was plotting something against him. If Devouring King was plotting something against him, Zhuan wouldn't feel guilty even if he refined the Devouring Seal. Of course, if Devour King really wanted to let Zhuan leave the bone world, Zhuan wouldn't take away the phagocytosis that originally belonged to Devour King. Dead Spirit, point me to the location of the possession array, Zhuan said indifferently. Dead Spirit didn't waste any time. After observing the surroundings, he waved his sleeve and instantly flew to the center of the Bone Halberd tribe's ruins. He said to the ruins beneath his feet, "It's here. Your level of array Dao isn't bad. You should be able to sense the aura of the possession array with just a little deduction." Zhuan arrived behind Dead Spirit and waved his sleeve. The ruins beneath Dead Spirit's feet were immediately cleared. Zhuan then took out 9 beast bone array discs and had them hover around him as he silently deduced the aura below. After half an hour, Zhuan suddenly opened his eyes. He grabbed Dead Spirit's soul with his right hand and said coldly, "I didn't sense any aura of the possession array." "You're lying to me." Dead Spirit's eyes shrank. He couldn't help but scream, "Impossible! I clearly sense the aura of the possession array. I can't be wrong. Let me deduce it." Zhuan slightly frowned. He released Dead Spirit and coldly stared at the latter. "Then you do it." Dead Spirit's eyes were solemn. He flew to the cleared ruins and continuously performed hand seals to deduce the possession array. But soon, Dead Spirit's face turned pale. He muttered, "Impossible. I clearly sense the aura of the possession array here. It can't be wrong." Zhuan was skeptical. Just as he was about to approach Dead Spirit, an invisible ripple blocked his chest. Then, Zhuan let out a muffled groan and couldn't help but explode backwards. At the same time, Dead Spirit was like a cool breeze as it quickly flew into the distance. Its speed was so fast that by the time Zhuan reacted, he could no longer see the figure of Dead Spirit. "This bastard, he really is lying to me," Zhuan coldly snorted, but did not chase after him. Instead, he formed a seal with his right hand, and the originally fleeing Dead Spirit let out a blood-curdling scream before disappearing into thin air. This undead spirit was as cunning as a fox. Zhuan had always been on guard against this old fellow, so when he took the old fellow's soul into the small temple, he had already secretly done something to his body. If this undead spirit did not play any tricks, Zhuan would naturally not act rashly. However, if this undead spirit played any tricks, Zhuan would definitely not be polite. What this undead spirit said should be 70% true and 30% false. Although I still don't know what kind of person the Devouring King is, you still have to be careful. Xiao He appeared beside Zhuan at some point and said in a deep voice, "I know about this." Zhuan nodded. He was no longer the brat from before. After experiencing so many hardships and dangers, Zhuan's mind had long since become extremely mature and experienced. He would no longer be like a newborn calf. If that devouring king is benevolent and righteous, I, will naturally stay away from him. If he is not benevolent and righteous, then don't blame me, Yun, for playing some tricks. Zhuan's eyes flickered. Immediately after, he took out the phagocytosis. Using the power of faith as a medium, he began to constantly refine the phagocytosis. At the same time, as the restrictions within the phagocytosis were constantly being refined by Zhuan, Yun imitated the method of setting up the corresponding restrictions. It had to be said that the power of faith was truly an expert at refining. Zhuan had observed the restrictions within the phagocytosis before. The methods were extremely profound, and the further one went, the more complicated and powerful the restrictions became. Chapter 2209. Awakening the Bloodline. Zhuan spent 3 months refining the 1,000 restrictions within the phagocytosis. Zhuan then used his mastery of the array Dao to imitate and set up the 1,000 restrictions within the phagocytosis. The aura of these restrictions was almost identical to the first 1,000 restrictions within the phagocytosis. If the devouring king hadn't refined the phagocytosis immediately, he wouldn't have been able to discover the problem with the first 1,000 restrictions. Zhuan was certain that the devouring king would only spend time refining the phagocytosis after letting him leave. Therefore, before Zhuan left, he wasn't worried that the devouring king would discover that the phagocytosis had been tampered with. Once Zhuan left the bone world, he wouldn't have to worry about the devouring king finding trouble with him. After all, once he left, the devouring king wouldn't be able to find trouble with him for a while. At that time, the devouring king would only need to erase all traces of Zhen. Of course, if the devouring king went back on his word, Yun would have no choice but to give him a taste of his own medicine. It's time to return to the corpse path. Zhuan glanced at the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. There was no reluctance in his eyes as he directly left. After leaving the Bone Halberd tribe, Yun arrived at the mountain range where he had emerged from the corpse path. He held the phagocytosis in his hand. Immediately, the originally dim phagocytosis began to emit a dense black light. Immediately after, a suction force surged out from the phagocytosis. Shortly after, a black vortex appeared above Zhuan. Zhuan knew that this was the entrance to the corpse path, so he entered without any hesitation. When Zhuan opened his eyes, he was already on the boundless bone staircase. He raised his head and looked at the blurry image at the end of the staircase. Zhuan did what he did last time. He revealed Devour's true body and roared at the end of the staircase. Invisible ripples appeared at the end of the staircase. The blurry image became clearer as Zhuan jumped inside. What appeared in front of Zhuan was the familiar bone palace. After entering the depths of the palace, the sloppy devouring king was still sitting cross-legged in front of the chessboard. His hands and feet were chained up. "Ah, Junior, you've done well. If it weren't for your help, I wouldn't have been able to get rid of my biggest problem." Devouring King slowly stood up and warmly invited Zhuan to sit in front of him. After Zhuan sat down, he smiled and said, "Senior, you must be joking. Helping Senior is what we agreed on. How could this kid break his promise?" Devouring King nodded as though he was satisfied with Zhuan's answer. He smiled and said, "Junior, it's time to return the phagocytosis, right?" Zhuan's eyes flickered. He smiled and handed the phagocytosis to Devouring King, saying, "I forgot. Please forgive me, Senior." Devouring King received the phagocytosis and examined it carefully. He laughed and said, "Junior, you're too polite. I heard from the dead spirit that your name is Zhun, right? Is that your human name?" Zhuan nodded. Devouring King smiled and said, "Then I'll call you Zhua Xiaoyu from now on. Since you've helped me get rid of the dead spirit, I can't not show any gratitude. I've promised to awaken the royal bloodline in your body. Are you willing?" "Of course, I'm willing. However, before I awaken the royal bloodline, I have a small request." Zhuan smiled. "Say it." There's no need to be so distant between us. Devouring King flicked his sleeves and said, Junior wants to leave this place. I'm sure Senior has known about this since the beginning. My main purpose in coming to the corpse heavens is to leave the skeleton world, Joan said. Devouring King nodded and said, This king naturally knows about this. Since the dead spirit has been removed, the seal won't be able to suppress this king for long. Once this king breaks free from the seal, I'll naturally bring you out of the skeleton world. Joan's heart sank. What he meant was to leave the skeleton world immediately. He didn't want to stay with someone as dangerous as Devouring King, let alone wait for the Devouring King to break free from the seal. He was clear that Devouring King's strength was terrifying. If the seal was broken, with Zhuowen's current strength, it would be a little difficult for him to fight against Devouring King. Therefore, he couldn't wait for Devouring King to break free from the seal. Senior, you've misunderstood my meaning. What I mean is that I want to leave this place now, Zhuowen said indifferently. Devouring King squinted his eyes and carefully sized up Jun. He smiled and said, Why are you in such a hurry to leave the skeleton world? Is there something urgent in the outside world? I don't think so, right? After all, you're not a real human. It's impossible for you to have any relationship with the human race. Zhuowen's eyes turned gloomy. He said coldly, Senior, don't tell me you don't want to let me out. I'll be honest with you. I've been living in the 8 heavens for a long time as a human. After so many years, I've also established my own force. Now that I've suddenly disappeared, my force will definitely be in danger. I won't let that happen because that force was created by me. Devouring King fell silent. He seriously sized up Zhuowen. After confirming that Zhuowen wasn't lying, he smiled and said, So that's how it is. Since that's the case, this king won't stop you. However, before you leave, this king will fulfill his promise and awaken the royal bloodline in your body. Zhuowen looked at Devouring King and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he nodded. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Devouring King revealed a satisfied look. He waved his sleeve and a huge blood-red array appeared on the bone wall behind him. The patterns on the blood-red array were complicated and ever-changing. If one looked at it carefully, they might feel dizzy. Clearly, this array wasn't ordinary. This is the Royal Bloodline Awakening Array. It's an array that has been passed down for generations in our Devouring clan. Normally, only Devouring King controls it. You're lucky to have met me, little guy. After saying that, Devouring King looked at Zhuowen and gestured for Zhuowen to go over. Zhuowen pondered and slowly walked over. His divine sense carefully observed the blood-red array in front of him. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with it, he took a step forward. I'm going to start the Bloodline Awakening ceremony now. You can't move recklessly. Otherwise, you'll hurt your foundation, Devouring King said solemnly. Zhuowen didn't say anything. He just looked at Devouring King in silence. However, he was still on guard in his heart. Devouring King formed a seal with both hands. During this period, the creaking sounds of the chains colliding were especially ear-piercing. Chapter 22:10. The true purpose. The moment the blood-red light burst out, the blood-red formation began to spin rapidly. Soon after, Zhuowen felt the blood in his entire body start to boil, like boiling water that was constantly surging and rolling, and an unprecedented wave of heat came from his body. The blood-red patterns on the blood-red formation behind Zhuowen were peeled off, piercing into Zhuowen's body like blood needles. Zhuowen could clearly feel that Devour's blood was turning from red to gold under the stimulation of the blood needles. An aura stronger than Devour's was overflowing with the blood. It seemed like something extremely powerful was awakening in Devour's body. Zhuowen naturally discovered the source of this aura, and his eyes slowly narrowed. If he had been wary of this bloodline awakening ceremony at the beginning, now that he felt this powerful aura of awakening, he actually believed it a little. He could clearly feel that as his blood turned gold, Devour was transforming. When all of his blood turned gold, Devour's transformation would be complete. Zhuowen quietly sensed Devour's transformation, and he couldn't help but feel happy. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed since the ceremony began. During these 10 days, the blood-red formation had been stimulating Devour's body, making him transform continuously. Zhuowen could clearly feel that Devour's power had increased imperceptibly during his transformation. Of course, he knew that it wasn't the main effect of the transformation. It was his bloodline. He knew that Devour's bloodline was much stronger than the ordinary bloodline. Perhaps he would have a heaven-defying innate talent. On the 15th day, more than 90% of Devour's blood had turned gold. As his bloodline continued to awaken, Yun couldn't suppress the restlessness in his heart. He directly revealed Devour's real body. Fortunately, Devour was prepared. He controlled the power of the formation, forcibly shrinking Devour's body to the size of several meters. If one looked carefully, one could see that the scales on Devour's real body weren't black anymore. Instead, they were faintly golden. Each of Devour's scales had a golden pattern, which looked strange and strange. Every time Zhuowen's eyes fell on the golden pattern, he could feel a sharp aura. It was as if what appeared in front of him wasn't an ordinary scale, but a peerless sharp blade. Without a doubt, the defensive power of Devour's scales was many times stronger than before. Little friend Zhuo, once the bloodline in your body has completely transformed, you will become a true member of the royal family. Now there is only 10% left. This 10% is the most crucial step. You cannot resist in any way. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted. At this moment, Devour King suddenly spoke, his voice solemn. Zhuowen's eyes also became serious. His eyes flickered, but he eventually nodded and said, "Senior, don't worry. As long as my royal bloodline is truly awakened, this Zhuo will cooperate unconditionally." Devour King nodded. His right hand formed a claw, and a black mist gushed out from his hand, turning into a giant claw that grabbed at Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen looked at the giant claw silently. He felt that something was wrong, but when he recalled Devour King's words, he forced himself to stand still and didn't move. The moment the giant claw landed on Zhuowen's head, it shrank to the size of an ordinary person. Then, it grabbed onto Zhuowen's head. A vast and powerful force came from the claw, invading Zhuowen's spiritual space. This force was extremely invasive. As soon as it entered Zhuowen's spiritual space, it rampaged and rushed towards his spiritual space. Zhuowen was caught off guard and spat out a mouthful of blood, his face incomparably pale. "Senior, what is the meaning of this? This has nothing to do with the royal bloodline awakening, right?" Zhuowen was shocked. He couldn't help but roar at Devour King, who had a gloomy look in his eyes. Unfortunately, Devour King didn't pay any attention to Zhuowen. Instead, he focused on controlling the claw that was grabbing onto Zhuowen's head, causing the force that invaded the depths of Zhuowen's spiritual sea to go deeper and invade. Zhuowen's heart sank. He recalled what Undead Spirit had said before. This Devour King really didn't have any good intentions. Fortunately, the force that invaded Zhuowen's spiritual space didn't do anything after entering the deepest part of his spiritual sea. Instead, it stopped there. However, the invading force continued to release pitch-black rays of light that affected Zhuowen's body like invisible ropes. Zhuowen was bound to the ground, unable to move. Clang. The sound of chains colliding rang out. Zhuowen's gaze couldn't help but fall on Devour King. Devour King slowly stood up and walked toward Zhuowen with a smile on his face. "What is the meaning of this?" Zhuowen asked with a gloomy look. Devour King didn't seem to mind. He said, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, we've reached the most crucial step of the bloodline awakening. I need to restrict your movements. Otherwise, if you move recklessly, the bloodline awakening might fail." After saying that, Devour King formed a seal with both hands. Instantly, a black formation half the size of the blood-red formation appeared in the center of the bone spear. The moment the black formation appeared, Zhuowen felt the aura of the black formation. His pupils involuntarily shrank. He said in a deep voice, "Possession formation?" At this moment, Zhuowen was both shocked and furious. It seemed that Undead Spirit was right. Devour King really did set up a possession formation in the sealed land. However, Undead Spirit had clearly said that he could feel the aura of the possession formation in the sealed land. Why didn't he feel anything when he was deducing it earlier? However, The only explanation now was that Devour King had hidden the possession formation beforehand. That was why he didn't sense the aura of the possession formation in the ruins of the Bone Halberd tribe. You want to possess me? Zhuan looked at Devour King with a gloomy look. Devour King sized up Zhuan and smiled faintly. Zhua Xiaoyu, your words are a little misleading. This king only wants to exchange bodies with you. I'm not trying to possess you. I'm just exchanging bodies. Zhuan's gaze turned even gloomier. He said, you want to complete the last 10% of the bloodline awakening after possessing me? Devour King grinned and didn't deny it. Clearly he was planning as Zhuan had guessed. Chapter 22:11. Falling out, the Devourer King laughed loudly and said, Zhua Xiao, you're too naive. I've been sealed in this place for countless years. Do you really think I can break free that easily? Let me tell you the truth. Even if the seal is damaged, I don't have much confidence in breaking free. When I said I could break free, I was just trying to calm you down. If I told you the truth, you would definitely be suspicious with your vigilance. Zhuo Wen's eyes gradually darkened. As expected, the Devourer King didn't have any good intentions. He had been scheming against him since the beginning. All right, I won't talk nonsense with you. I don't plan to kill you. I only want to exchange souls with you. When the time comes, you'll take my place and endure the imprisonment in this place. Meanwhile, I'll use your identity to leave the skeleton world and return to the Devourer world to take back my throne. The Devourer King grinned. He formed a sword with his right hand and slowly pressed it against Zhuo Wen's forehead. Bang! However, when the Devourer King's sword finger was about to touch Zhuo Wen's forehead, a series of explosions rang out from the Devourer King's body. Puchi! The Devourer King spat out a mouthful of blood and couldn't help but retreat. If one looked carefully, one would see that the Devourer King's body was in a sorry state as blood mist burst out from his body. The moment the Devourer King retreated, a green vortex appeared beside Zhuo Wen. The white-robed Zhuo Wen's main body shot out. 9 beast bone formation discs floated around Zhuo Wen's main body and rotated continuously. Zhuo Wen's main body formed a seal with both hands. The 9 beast bone formation discs turned into a sharp vortex and slammed into the black claw on Zhuo Wen's forehead. At the same time, Zhuo Wen's soul executed the soul-slaying technique. With one attack from the inside and one from the outside, the claw on Zhuo Wen's forehead finally collapsed and dissipated. As for the black-clothed Zhuo Wen, after breaking free from the claws, he immediately regained his mobility. He took a step forward and condensed a divine sword of lightning and fire in his hand. Then he threw it at the Devourer King. At this moment, the Devourer King was still affected by the phagocytosis. Blood mist kept bursting out from his body, and his face was extremely ugly. Now that he saw the extreme Dao divine sword being thrown at him, his face immediately turned gloomy. He roared angrily and hurriedly threw the phagocytosis aside. The phagocytosis had been tampered with by Zhuan. He couldn't control the power that erupted from it at all. If he didn't throw it away, he would only be passively bombarded by this power and suffer unbearable pressure. He might as well throw it away first. The instant the phagocytosis was thrown away, Zhuan waved his sleeve and retrieved the phagocytosis. Zhuan had already refined 1,000 seals on the phagocytosis. He had also placed his own seals on it. Therefore, if Zhuan wanted to trigger the seals on the phagocytosis, he only needed a thought to do so. Originally, he didn't want to use the phagocytosis's seals to deal with the Devourer King. Unfortunately, the Devourer King was heartless in the first place. Zhuan couldn't be blamed for being unjust. Boom! After recovering, the Devourer King clenched his right fist and smashed the Thunderfire Divine Sword in front of him. The Thunderfire Divine Sword was smashed into pieces. You tampered with the phagocytosis? You're really despicable. The Devourer King glared at Zhuan. Zhuan sneered and said, We're the same. I just have an extra layer of defense against you. If you didn't have the intention to harm me, I wouldn't have triggered the seals on the phagocytosis. Bastard! The Devourer King roared. He took a step forward and slammed his huge palms forward. Instantly, a black mist surged over and slammed into Zhuo Wen's chest. Zhuan didn't reject it. He summoned the phagocytosis and immediately activated the first 1,000 seals on it. The black mist of the phagocytosis erupted like a primordial beast. It expanded to several thousand meters in size and blasted towards the Devourer King mercilessly. Boom! A thunderous sound rang out. Zhuowen groaned and involuntarily took a few steps back. On the other hand, the Devourer King was blasted to the ground, looking rather miserable. Although the Devourer King was strong, it was sad that he was sealed. He didn't even have a tenth of his strength left. Moreover, his phagocytosis had been refined by Jun. He didn't have many tricks up his sleeves. Now that he was clashing with Yuan who possessed the phagocytosis, he was inevitably at a disadvantage. Yuan also knew about the Devourer King's situation. He wasn't afraid of the Devourer King at all. He said indifferently, "Tell me the exit of the bone world and I won't make things difficult for you." The Devourer King sneered, "You want me to let you out? Dream on. Today, I want you to stay here forever." After saying that, the Devourer King charged toward Zhuan again. Zhuan furrowed his brows. He stomped his right foot and summoned the phagocytosis in his hand. Rolling black mist filled the air, forming a terrifying jade seal that smashed down like a mountain. The Devourer King was sent flying again. However, what made Zhuowen frown was that the Devourer King's body was as tough as steel. The phagocytosis didn't affect him at all. However, when he thought about how terrifying Devourer's body was, Zhuowen felt relieved. The Devourer King was the king of the Devourer clan. His body should be even more terrifying than Devourer's. If the Devourer King wasn't bound by chains and couldn't use his true body to fight, Zhuowen wouldn't have been able to suppress him so easily. Bang, bang, bang. As the Devourer King crawled back up after being sent flying, Zhuowen grew impatient. The Devourer King didn't seem to know fatigue at all. He didn't stop at all. "Kid, when the undead spirit fought with the Devourer King, didn't he say that the Devourer King was afraid of the power of faith? You can try the power of faith." Xiao Hei's voice suddenly resounded in Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He immediately summoned the small temple. With a thought, the small temple floated above the phagocytosis. The phagocytosis attacked the Devourer King again. The Devourer King snorted inwardly. His body was extremely terrifying, far surpassing the ordinary Devourer King. The phagocytosis only unlocked 1,000 seals, which didn't do much damage to him. At most, it would just tickle him. The phagocytosis attacked again, but the Devourer King didn't care. His gaze fell on Zhuowen, who wasn't far from him. He was thinking about how to get close to Zhuowen. When he recognized that Zhuowen's clone was Devourer, who had the royal bloodline, he already had a plan. He planned to seize the body of Devourer, who had the royal bloodline. Once he succeeded in seizing the body, with his experience and talent, he could reach his peak in no time. He could even go one step further. At that time, he would break into the devouring world and challenge the new king. He would drag that hateful new king down from the throne and take back the throne that belonged to him. However, when the Devourer King used his arm to block the phagocytosis, his face changed drastically. A power that he hated the most invaded his body. The Devourer King spurted out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. His tough chest had caved in, and he looked severely injured. The power of faith? When did you obtain this power? The Devourer King growled as he glared at Zhuowen, who was not far away. Zhuowen wasn't in a hurry. He slowly raised the small temple. Without waiting for the Devourer King to speak, he controlled the phagocytosis to attack the Devourer King again. At the same time, the milky white power of faith in the small temple shrouded the phagocytosis like a vast sea. Bastard! The Devourer King couldn't help but curse. He raised both of his arms to block the phagocytosis. Chapter 22:12. Heaven's Devourer Mind Bang. 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 Zhuowen kept controlling the phagocytosis to bombard Devourer King. Devourer King was exhausted, and his injuries were getting worse. Devourer King felt very sullen. If he wasn't sealed and couldn't reveal his true form, how could he be suppressed by Zhuowen? Bang. Devourer King groaned and was sent flying, smashing into the bone wall behind him. Zhuowen slowly walked over and said indifferently, "Tell me the exit of the bone world." Devourer King slowly got up and sneered, "Do you think I'll tell you? Don't think that you've grasped my weakness just because you have the power of faith. I can tell you clearly that in this place, even if the power of faith restrains me, you can't kill me." "Are you trying to scare me?" Juan was unmoved. Devourer King said indifferently, "Whether I'm trying to scare you or not, you'll know once you try." Before Devourer King could finish his words, the phagocytosis smashed into his body. This time, Juan didn't hold back at all. Phagocytosis combined with the power of faith from the small temple made the phagocytoses might reach an unprecedented level. After Juan put away the phagocytosis, he silently looked at Devourer King, who was smashed into a pulp. His eyes were filled with shock. In Juan's opinion, that strike just now was enough to crush Devourer King. Now, he realized that he was overthinking. Devourer King wasn't dead, and he even had a single breath left. Moreover, when Devourer King was on his last breath, Juan discovered that Devourer King's body was gradually emitting vitality. Moreover, the vitality was growing stronger and stronger. In the end, Devourer King actually recovered to his peak state. Juan frowned and looked at this scene in confusion. How did Devourer King recover so quickly? Devourer King sneered and said, "This king's vitality has been sealed. Once this king's body is on the verge of death, the sealed vitality will loosen. I've said it before. No matter what you do, you won't be able to kill me." "Oh," Juan replied. He didn't give King Devourer a chance to speak again. The Devourer's seal, wrapped in a terrifying aura, combined with the faith power of the small temple, smashed at King Devourer, shutting him up completely. Juan Zun, on the other hand, had 9 beast bone array discs floating around him as he looked around the hall made of bones. The Devourer King's words had inadvertently revealed a piece of information. There should be a loophole in the sealing array. That was why the Devourer King was able to borrow the sealed life force when he was on the verge of death. As long as Juan could find the loophole in the seal and fix it, he did not believe that the Devouring King could survive. Thinking up to here, Juan's main body sat cross-legged on the ground and began to deduce. The sealing formation in this bone palace was extremely brilliant. In the process of Juan's deduction, he actually encountered many complex problems, which made him somewhat confused. He was sure that this sealing array was a Tier 9 array. Juan had encountered many Tier 8 arrays, but he had never encountered one that he couldn't understand. "Kid, let me out." This dragon master smelled the heaven devourer vein in this palace. "This vein should be formed because of Devourer King," Xiao He suddenly said anxiously. Juan nodded and released the Thunderfire sword and the Blood Immortal sword. Devourer King was completely suppressed by him. He didn't fear Devourer King at all. Motherfucker, this dragon master had already discovered the heaven devourer vein. However, I didn't come out the first time because of this old man. Now this old man is so useless. If this dragon master had known, I would have come out earlier and slashed this old man. The moment Xiao He appeared, he stood on the sword's hilt and cast a sidelong glance at Devourer King, who was in a sorry state under the attacks of phagocytosis, and Xiao He, and snorted. "Master Long is right. How can this old fellow be a match for the handsome and mighty Master Long, who can shock the heavens and make ghosts weep? Dragon Master didn't come out earlier because he didn't want to fight. Isn't that right, Dragon Master?" Perhaps it had been a long time since the Blood Immortal flattered someone. The moment she came out, she began to flatter Xiao He happily. Her words made Xiao He reveal a satisfied expression. His face was full of praise. "You too, get lost and find the heaven devourer vein. Don't disturb me. Otherwise, I will let you two deal with Devourer King." Juan couldn't stand the two of them and couldn't help but scold them. The Blood Immortal sword quickly shut her mouth and smiled flatteringly at Tun. She subconsciously wanted to flatter Juan. However, when she thought of how fierce Juan was, she obediently shut her mouth. Xiao He nodded, still maintaining the demeanor of an expert. He didn't care about Juan's scolding. He looked at Devourer King with disdain and said, "You don't need me to deal with this kind of trash. Little blood disciple, let's go. Follow me to find the heaven devourer vein. I will let you live a good life." "Yes, Dragon Master. Little blood disciple will listen to you." The two supreme-grade divine swords swaggered past Devourer King and headed towards the Heaven Devourer vein hidden in the palace. Devourer King was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Although the two divine swords were extraordinary, they were nothing in his eyes. They actually dared to intimidate him. Moreover, the sword spirit of the Thunder Fire Sword was even more supreme-grade. It actually showed a look of disdain towards him. This made the arrogant Devourer King gnash his teeth in anger. He couldn't wait to stew Xiaohe. But now, Devourer King was suppressed by phagocytosis and the small temple. He could only watch as the Thunder Fire Sword and Blood Immortal Sword flew away. Devourer King, my request is actually very simple. Tell me the exit of the skeleton world and I won't attack you again. Otherwise, I don't believe you'll still be so confident after I find the loophole of this grand ceiling formation and fix it, Zhuan said coldly. Devourer King laughed and said, "Who do you think you are? This grand ceiling formation is a level 9 grand ceiling formation. Even if it has been damaged for a long time, it's still not something a level 7 divine array master like you can fix. I'm afraid you can't even find the loophole, right?" Zhuowen's original body looked at Devourer King's disdainful and gloating expression. However, he wasn't angry at all. Instead, he formed a seal with both hands. The 9 beast bone formation discs floating around him began to rotate and arrange themselves as he continued to deduce the grand ceiling formation in the palace. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Zhuowen's original body had been sitting in the palace for 3 whole years. In the past 3 years, Devourer King had been suppressed by phagocytosis and the small temple. Every time, he would be injured. However, Devourer King was extremely stubborn. He didn't give in at all. Relying on his enormous vitality, he seemed to have thrown caution to the wind. In the past 3 years, Zhuowen's original body had worked tirelessly to deduce the grand ceiling formation. Although he didn't make much progress, his understanding of the array Dao had increased by hundreds and thousands of times. Originally, Zhuowen didn't understand most of the level 9 grand ceiling formation. But now, he understood a part of it. Moreover, it wasn't Zhuowen's first time coming into contact with a level 9 grand ceiling formation. Back when he was in old man Wu Qing's cave dwelling, he had studied the pattern of a level 9 grand ceiling formation on a stone tablet. Chapter 22:13. Loophole Zhuowen also discovered that his array Dao had unknowingly reached the pinnacle of a grade 7 divine array master. He was only a step away from becoming a grade 8 divine array master. In the past 3 years, the Devouring King had been observing Zhuan. He was especially shocked when he saw that Zhuowen's array Dao was rapidly improving. Zhuowen's improvement speed was simply too fast. This was the first time the Devouring King had seen such a terrifyingly talented divine array master like Zhuan. If this lad continued to deduce, wouldn't this lad's array Dao be able to reach the grade 8 divine array master? So what if this lad's array Dao is a grade 8 divine array master? Grade 9 divine array masters aren't that easy to deduce. The Devouring King couldn't help but console himself. Another 10 years passed and Zhuan was still in the hall. Moreover, his eyes were getting brighter and brighter. Zhuowen's right hand formed an extremely strange seal and suddenly pointed at the void. The 9 beast bone array discs formed a ring shape and began to revolve in midair. A black halo was emitted from the 9 beast bone array discs. This black halo was like ripples in the water. Layer by layer, it formed layers upon layers of circular ripples. In an instant, it spread and enveloped the huge hall. As the black halo continued to spread, a golden radiance appeared in the void of the hall. The golden radiance became clearer and clearer. One could clearly see that the golden radiance had formed an extremely sharp outline of a great array. This lad, when the Devouring King saw this, he couldn't help but exclaim. No one was more familiar than him with the sudden appearance of the golden array in the void. This was because this was the array that had trapped him for countless years. Originally, this great array was hidden in the void of the hall. It was illusory and even he couldn't find the exact location of this great array. But right now, this Zhuowen had actually managed to force the grand ceiling formation to reveal its true form through his deductions. This required an extremely powerful formation Dao technique. Zhuowen's eyes shone like the stars in the night sky. His heart was filled with excitement. After 13 years of deduction and constant pondering, he finally deduced the seal array hidden in the main hall. He was very clear that once the great array was revealed, it would be much easier to deduce the loophole of this great array. If Zhuowen could think of this, the Devouring King naturally could too. Right now, the Devouring King was even regretting it. If he knew that Zhuowen's array Dao was so profound, he wouldn't have forced this lad to deduce the great array on the spot. Now that the great array was deduced by Zhuowen, it was only a matter of time he would find the loophole. The Devouring King was completely passive. If Zhuowen really sealed the loophole, he would really be in danger. With his strength and vitality sealed, wouldn't he become a fish on Zhuowen's chopping board? Just as Zhuowen was about to continue deducing the loophole, the Devouring King hurriedly said, "Wait." Zhuowen glanced at the Devouring King indifferently. His hands didn't slow down as he used the 9 beast bone array discs to deduce the loophole of the great array. Previously, the Devouring King had been seizing vitality from the loophole. Zhuowen only needed to follow the trajectory of the vitality to find the loophole of the great array. The Devouring King was burning with anxiety. No matter what he said, Zhuowen simply ignored him. Even when he promised to let Zhuowen leave, he was still ignored by Zhuowen. Around 4 hours later, Zhuowen revealed a rich smile at the corner of his mouth. Soon after, he arrived at the northern edge of the Great Formation. The 9 formation discs were in the shape of flower petals and stuck to a corner of the Great Golden Formation. This inconspicuous corner was much dimmer than the other places. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it at all. Zhuowen could clearly feel an exuberant vitality gushing out from this corner. He knew that he had found a loophole. The Devouring King's face was deathly pale. He knew that Zhuowen had grasped his weakness. Zhuowen turned his head and looked at the pale-faced Devouring King. He smiled faintly and said, "Devouring King, do you have any last words?" The Devouring King's face was gloomy, but his tone was much gentler. He said, "Zhuo Xiaoyu, I'll tell you the exit of the bone world. You have to promise me that you won't touch me, let alone kill me." Zhuowen looked at the Devouring King calmly and said, "Don't you think it's funny that you're saying this now?" After saying that, Zhuowen began to study the loophole. The Devouring King's face turned uglier and uglier. His heart was in a panic. He knew that once Zhuowen fixed the loophole, he would really be finished. The Devouring King had completely lost his mind. He didn't think that the sealing array was a grade 9 array. Even if he wanted to fix it, it wouldn't be so easy. It was indeed amazing that Zhuowen could make the sealing array appear, but it didn't mean that Zhuowen could completely fix the hole in the sealing array. Although Zhuowen was studying the loophole, his mind was focused on the Devouring King. Even though he seemed to have a card up his sleeve, he was actually very nervous. In fact, the moment he saw the loophole, he knew that it was impossible for him to fix it with his current level of array Dao. Unless Zhuowen reached the peak of grade 8 Divine Array Master and studied here for thousands of years, he might be able to fix the loophole. However, he didn't have the ability to do so now. However, he had to continue acting. He knew that the Devouring King was already in a panic. He couldn't afford to lose his composure. As expected, when the Devouring King saw how confident Zhuowen was, he became even more flustered. In the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll let you go and teach you how to use the phagocytosis. How about it?" Zhuowen's heart was moved. Although he could use the phagocytosis, he wasn't used to it. He couldn't bring out its original power. He knew that the phagocytosis had its own way of using it. It was just that he didn't know how to use it. Now that the Devouring King had taken the initiative, Zhuowen naturally couldn't ask for more. Zhuowen stopped and looked at the Devouring King. He shook his head and said calmly, "This isn't enough. You should know that I have something on you. You want to use this to get rid of me?" The Devouring King cursed in his heart. However, he had no choice but to act like a grandson. He opened his mouth and spat out a transparent tube. The tube was filled with golden liquid. "This is the royal blood essence. Take it. As long as you consume it, your royal bloodline will be fully awakened. Moreover, there won't be any side effects." The devouring king tossed the transparent tube to Zhuan with great reluctance. Clearly, the royal blood essence was an extremely precious treasure to the devouring king. Zhuan received the transparent tube and used his divine sense to scan the royal blood essence inside. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with the blood essence, he calmly put it away. Then, he turned his attention back to the devouring king. What? You still don't think it's enough? Don't be too greedy. The devouring king said gloomily. Chapter 22:14. Temporal Temple Devour King's face sank. He looked at Zhuan and took a deep breath. What else do you want? I've already given you the method to use the phagocytosis and the royal blood essence. Isn't that enough? Zhuan looked at Devour King and said indifferently, as the king of the Devour clan, I don't think you're that shabby, right? You'd better think about how you're going to take out something that can satisfy me. Devour King sucked in a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. With a cold snort, he waved his sleeve and took out a yellowish map, tossing it to Zhuan. Seeing the puzzled look on Zhuo Wen's face, the Devourer King calmly explained, this map records the location of the temporal temple. Originally, this item was my most precious possession, but today I have to take it out. If you're still not satisfied, this king can't do anything about it. At most, we'll fight to the death. Zhuan received the yellowish map. When he touched it, he felt a soft, silky texture. Although the map looked old and shabby, it felt extremely comfortable to the touch. The moment he touched it, Zhuan knew that this map wasn't ordinary. However, Zhuan was a little puzzled. He had never heard of this temporal temple before. Could there be some kind of treasure inside? Devour King saw the puzzled expression on Zhuan's face and knew that Zhuan didn't know anything. He could only explain, the temporal temple is the most mysterious temple in the 8 heavens. No one knows where it came from or where it went. It's illusory and hard to find traces of. It's said that the temporal temple contains the power of space-time law, and this space-time law is the pinnacle of the starry sky law. Its power is infinitely close to the heavenly Tao. Among the human race, isn't there a rumor that when you touch a trace of the heavenly Tao, you'll be able to advance to the 9 steps void sky? In fact, other than comprehending a trace of the heavenly Tao, there's another way, and that's to comprehend the space-time law. As the pinnacle of the starry sky law, fully comprehending the space-time law can also smoothly advance to the void sky 9 steps. Moreover, the complete space-time law is even more terrifying than a trace of the heavenly Tao law. Even in the void sky 9 steps, it is still a powerful existence. After saying that, the devouring king glanced at Zhuan, hoping to see the shock in Zhuan's eyes. Unfortunately, Zhuan was still as calm as water, as if he was deep in thought. Although Zhuan looked calm on the surface, he was extremely shocked in his heart. He didn't expect the space-time law to be so terrifying. It was actually even stronger than a trace of heavenly Tao law. Of course, no matter how powerful the space-time law was, it couldn't compare to the true heavenly Tao law. It was only stronger than the trace of heavenly Tao law that Su Tianjuding had comprehended. Moreover, one had to completely comprehend the space-time law. At the same time, Zhuan recalled that when he was on the heavenly armor planet, he had simultaneously comprehended the laws of time and the laws of space. The two laws had combined to form a trace of the power of space-time. This strand of space-time power still existed in his body. At that time, the might of the power of space-time was indeed terrifying. However, after Zhuan left the heavenly armor planet, the effect of the power of space-time on him was negligible. Therefore, he didn't use it much. Now that he heard the devouring king mention the space-time temple, he immediately recalled the trace of the power of space-time hidden in his body. Back then, the laws of time and space he had comprehended belonged to the category of laws. They were one level lower than the starry sky law. On the other hand, the strand of space-time power formed from the combination of the laws of time and space belonged to the starry sky law. However, the space-time power Zhuan had formed from the combination of the laws of time and space was too insignificant. Therefore, he didn't pay too much attention to the strand of space-time power that was derived from it. Thinking of this, Zhuan's heart surged with excitement. Soon after, his gaze fell on the dim yellow map in his hand. He discovered that the map didn't record the location of the space-time temple. At the end of the route on the map, there was an image of a key. That is the space-time key. It is said that there are 3 space-time keys. They are red, black, and white respectively. Only by obtaining all 3 space-time keys can one finally open the space-time temple. However, obtaining any space-time key will allow you to enter the space-time wilderness where the space-time temple is located. However, if you want to open the space-time temple, you must gather all 3 space-time keys. The Devouring King continued to explain, giving Zhuowen a rough understanding. Zhuo Xiaoyu, this map is extremely valuable. Not to mention the space-time temple, the space-time wilderness is filled with countless treasures. Moreover, the space-time key can bring several people in at once. No matter who it is, I believe you know better than me how precious the space-time key is, right? The Devouring King said in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded and put away the map. He looked at the Devouring King and said, "Since you have the map of the space-time key, why didn't you go and get it?" The Devouring King's eyes flickered and he said indifferently, "After I obtained the map, I was suppressed and sealed by the new king. I didn't have time to go to the destination marked on the map." Zhuowen glanced at the Devouring King. Although the Devouring King's explanation was reasonable, he was still a little worried about the Devouring King. However, regardless of whether the map was real or not, Zhuowen still had to make a trip there. Zhuowen had comprehended both the space-time law and the space-time law at the same time. Moreover, he had fused a trace of space-time energy. The space-time temple was actually quite suitable for Zhuowen. Moreover, the Devouring King had said that if one fully comprehended the space-time law, they would be able to advance to the Void Sky 9th step. They would be stronger than ordinary Void Sky 9th step experts. Sure. Now, tell me where the exit is. Zhuowen said calmly. The Devourer King heaved a sigh of relief and waved his sleeve. Instantly, a black vortex appeared in the sky above the hall. He said, "The skeleton world was originally formed from my body. The exit is on the other side of this vortex." "How can I believe that you're not lying to me?" Zhuowen said in disbelief. The Devouring King snorted coldly and said, "I have no reason to lie to you. If you don't believe me, then do as you wish." Zhuowen looked deeply at the Devouring King. Then, with a stomp of his right foot, he jumped into the devouring whirlpool provided by the Devouring King. "Kid, you're not loyal. Wait for me." At this moment, Xiao He, who had been searching for the heavens devouring lode with the blood immortal sword, suddenly rushed out. When she saw that Zhuowen had taken the lead to leave, she immediately followed. The Thunder Fire Sword and the Blood Immortal Sword had been tirelessly searching for the heavens devouring lode in the hall for the past 13 years. They had practically turned the hall upside down. Finally, they found all the heavens devouring lode in the hall and devoured it. The 2 divine swords had improved rapidly and their strength had greatly increased. Among them, Xiao He's improvement was the most obvious. Her strength was probably not inferior to an early Void Sky 8th step cultivator. The Blood Immortal Sword was not bad either. It had also reached the Void Sky 7th step. Chapter 22:15. Leaving the Bone World, Devouring King's eyes flickered. Looking at the 2 divine swords that had insulted him, he sneered in his heart. He stretched out his right hand and a black mist burst out, forming a huge black claw. "Fuck! You son of a bitch, Devouring King! How dare you attack me? See if I don't chop you to death!" Xiao He immediately noticed Devouring King's strange movement and couldn't help but shout. However, although Xiao He was shouting happily, he didn't slash at Devouring King. Instead, he sped up and fled into the devouring whirlpool. Devouring King's face turned gloomy. Xiao He's mouth was too cheap. How dare he insult him like that? It made him furious. Therefore, Devouring King was even more merciless. The might of his claw increased by a lot, which made Xiao He curse him in his heart. However, just as the black claw was about to hit Xiao He, a black light suddenly shot down from the black whirlpool above, causing the black claw to disperse. At the same time, The black light smashed into Devouring King's body like a hot knife through butter. Devouring King groaned and couldn't help but retreat. He looked at the black light with a dark gaze. The black light belonged to his phagocytosis. Unfortunately, the phagocytosis wasn't under his control, but Yun. Devouring King, my divine swords are not for you to control. A cold voice came from the black whirlpool, causing Devouring King to not dare to act rashly. Old trash, there's no need for this dragon lord to attack. My little brother can beat a piece of trash like you to death. Next time, you better open your eyes and look at this grandpa before you attack. Blackie heaved a sigh of relief, but his mouth was still as vicious as ever. He disdainfully glanced at the Devouring King, who had an ugly expression on his face. Then he called the Blood Immortal and entered the Black Vortex. After Xiao He, the Blood Immortal sword, and the phagocytosis entered the Black Whirlpool, the Black Whirlpool slowly closed. Boom! Devouring King punched the ground. He was so angry that his body was shaking. He raised his head and roared to the sky to vent his anger. After venting his anger, King Devourer's eyes fell on the loophole. With a single step, he stopped at the loophole. After observing for a while, the Devourer King frowned slightly because he couldn't find any traces of the formation being broken through at all. In other words, Yuan wasn't trying to break through the formation at all. He was just putting on an act. The ceiling formation is a level 9 formation. That guy is at most a level 7 formation master. He must have tried his best to make the ceiling formation appear. As for fixing the loophole, it's impossible for him to do it in a short time. In other words, it's impossible for him to fix it with his current level of formation skills. Zhuan had scared him. When he thought about how he had given the phagocytosis, the space-time keys map, and the royal blood essence to Zhuan, King Devourer couldn't help but have the urge to vomit blood. Zhuan, this king will remember you. If this king has the chance to break out of the formation in the future, I will cut you into 1,000 pieces. I won't rest until you're dead. King Devourer roared. Outside the spatial fault, a black whirlpool quietly appeared. Shortly after, a black-clothed young man with 2 divine swords revolving around him slowly stepped out of the black whirlpool. This King Devourer really keeps his promise. The exit he gave this time was the right one. Zhuan looked at the spatial fault behind him and the corner of his mouth curled up. He was in a good mood as he muttered under his breath. This time, Yuan had stayed in the bone world for more than 10 years. Although his cultivation base hadn't improved at all, his harvest was bountiful. Not only had his array skills reached the pinnacle of the 7th level, but the royal blood essence, the space-time keys map, and the phagocytosis were rare treasures in the outside world. Zhuan first distanced himself from the spatial fault and randomly found an asteroid floating in the starry sky. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he summoned the Kanglin's secret realm and all the people within it. Master! King Spirit, Chao Tairan, Song Binhong, Zhang Ziqing, and Lu Manfeng all stood before Zhuan and bowed respectfully. Lin Shiping looked at Zhuan with a complicated expression. She had heard a lot about Zhuan from King Spirit in the Zhonglan's secret realm. She knew how terrifyingly strong Zhuan was in the outside world. In addition to Lin Shiping, Qin Changxing, Han Yen, and the dozen people he had saved in the cave also appeared in front of Zhuan. Chen Changxing naturally followed King Spirit and the others to respectfully address Zhuan as master. Han Yen and the others also thanked Zhuan in a very polite tone. This is not the bone world? Han Yen found that something was wrong. Looking at the surrounding space, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. It was Han Yen who had spoken. The surrounding people were also surprised. They also found that they were no longer in the bone world, but in the real starry sky. Everyone, I have left the bone world. This is the Great Brahma Domain. Zhuan explained calmly. It really is the Great Brahma Domain's starry sky. I know this place. It's the starry sky not far from the spatial fault. This is great. I didn't expect that I would be able to leave the bone world in my lifetime. A middle-aged man couldn't help but cry. Not only this middle-aged man, but more than a dozen people who had been saved by Zhuan were also crying with joy. They had lived in the bone world for too long. In that environment where they couldn't use divine power, they had to run around for a living. No one could understand their sadness. Now that they could leave the bone world, they were very excited. Plop. Han Yen took the lead and knelt on the ground. Immediately, more than a dozen people knelt on the ground. Benefactor, please accept our respect. If it weren't for you, we would have died in the Bone Halberd tribe. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to leave the bone world. Everything is given to us by you. Han Yen was so excited that he kept kowtowing to Jun. The rest of the people followed Han Yen and kowtowed. Han Yen was right. If it weren't for Zhuowen, they wouldn't have been able to leave. Everything was Zhuowen's credit. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and helped Han Yen and more than a dozen people up. He smiled and said, I just did it in passing. You don't have to do this. Otherwise, I can't accept it. Han Yen said seriously, Benefactor, please don't say that. Saving a life is like giving birth to a parent. Benefactor, I am the Supreme Elder of Half Moon Hall. If you have the chance, you must come to Half Moon Hall. Han Yen will definitely give you a grand welcome. Elder Han Yen is right. Benefactor, please come to White Jade Tower in the future. I, by Zhang Tang, will definitely give you a grand welcome. Me too. Heavenly Demon Island will always welcome Benefactor. More than a dozen people competed to announce the forces they belonged to. Needless to say, these people all had high status and were extremely powerful. They were all core experts of their respective forces. Of course, Han Yan's status was the highest. After all, Han Yen was an 8th-step Void Sky powerhouse and the Supreme Elder of Half Moon Hall. He was considered the leader of this group. What made Zhuowen feel awkward was that there were also cultivators from Clear Void Peak, High Heaven Sect, and Dark Fantasy Sect among them. Especially when he saw the cultivators of these 3 sects enthusiastically inviting him to Clear Void Peak, High Heaven Sect, and Dark Fantasy Sect, Zhuowen felt extremely awkward. Chapter 22:16. Awakening the bloodline, it was hard for Zhuowen to refuse their kindness, so he could only agree. After all, this was their kindness, and Zhuowen would not reject them in front of everyone. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, the dozen or so people were satisfied. They immediately clasped their hands at Zhuowen and left. Lin Shiping followed Han Yen. She was a disciple of the Half Moon Hall, and Han Yen was the Supreme Elder of the Half Moon Hall. She planned to follow Han Yen back to the Half Moon Hall. Big Brother Zhua, thank you for taking care of me in the skeleton world. Lin Shiping came in front of Zhuowen, her beautiful eyes filled with gratitude. She bowed to Zhuowen. Zhuowen grinned and said, It's okay. It was fate that brought us together. Since I was able to meet you in the skeleton world, it was fate. You don't have to take it to heart. Ever since Lin Shiping came out of the Tsanglan's secret territory, Zhuowen felt that Lin Shiping was a little distant from him. Perhaps Lin Shiping had heard a lot about him from the king's spirits. Lin Shiping nodded and smiled. I still have to thank you, Big Brother Zhua. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have been able to live until now, and I wouldn't have been able to leave the skeleton world. Also, I have to go back to the Half Moon Hall. Goodbye. After saying that, Lin Shiping clasped her hands at Zhuowen again and went to Han Yan's side. Han Yen looked at Zhuowen and smiled. Brother Zhua, if you have time, you must come to the Half Moon Hall. I will personally welcome you. This is my identity token. When you come to the Half Moon Hall, just send me a message and I will definitely come out to welcome you, Brother Zhua. After saying that, Han Yen threw a token to Zhuowen. He then turned into a rainbow and left with Lin Shiping. Zhuowen held the token in his hand with a thoughtful look in his eyes. This is Nanyu. Let's go to the Devil Pearl sect to take a look first. I wonder if old man Wuqing kept his promise and destroyed the Devil Pearl sect? Zhuowen thought for a moment, then left. The king's spirit and the other servants followed closely behind, not daring to stray too far from Zhuowen. Back then, Fu Yuz, Qin Changxing, and Yang Zhonghui had chased him until he was in an extremely sorry state. In the end, Zhuowen had even been forced into a fault in space. In the Bone World, Zhuowen heard from Qin Changxing that Fu Yuz had died in the Bone World and that Qin Changxing had become his servant. However, Yang Zhonghui had given up on pursuing Zhuowen because she was worried about the Devil Pearl sect. However, Zhuan would not give up his pursuit of Zhuowen just because of Yang Zhonghui. In his heart, he had no intention of sparing Yang Zhonghui. Back then, Yang Zhonghui had also wanted to kill Zhuan. Zhuan would not let go of Yang Zhonghui, who was a hidden danger. However, before looking for Yang Zhonghui, Zhuan planned to use the royal blood essence to completely awaken his royal bloodline. Devour's royal bloodline had been awakened by Devour King by 90%. The remaining 10% required the royal blood essence. Once Devour's royal bloodline was awakened, Zhuan knew that even if he did not reveal his true body, his strength would be comparable to the late stage of the Void Sky 8th step. If he revealed his true body, even a peak Void Sky 8th step expert would not necessarily be his opponent. Speaking of which, Zhuowen's strength had been greatly reduced by Devour's doppelganger's strength. His true body's cultivation was still at the Void Sky 5th step. Even if he relied on the secondary heaven-breaking divine artifact, he could only fight an early Void Sky 8th step expert. If it was an intermediate Void Sky 8th step expert, Zhuowen's true body would not necessarily be his opponent. Thinking of this, Zhuan planned to raise his true body's cultivation as soon as possible. Of course, it was not easy to raise the virtual sky world's cultivation level unless he had a heaven-defying opportunity. Zhuan chose an uninhabited planet in the starry sky and found a cave. After arranging a powerful defensive formation outside, he began to cultivate in seclusion. I hope this royal blood essence won't disappoint me. Zhuowen's true body stood in front of the black-robed Zhuan. At this moment, the black-robed Zhuowen's upper body was naked, revealing his muscular body. He sat cross-legged and calmly looked at Zhuowen's true body. Zhuowen's true body took out the royal blood essence and crushed the transparent tube outside. The golden blood essence hidden in the tube was like a small golden snake, suddenly drilling into the black-robed Zhuowen's chest. In an instant, the black-robed Zhuowen's meridians protruded. If one looked carefully, these protruding meridians were actually dazzling golden, looking extremely strange. At the same time, an incomparably vast aura suddenly burst out of the black-robed Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's true body couldn't help but take a few steps back. He looked at the black-robed Zhuowen with a solemn gaze. He knew he could only rely on his clone from now on. Time passed minute by minute, second by second, and Zhuowen had been in seclusion for 3 months. On this day, this uninhabited planet suddenly erupted with a blazing golden light, mixed with a deafening and terrifying beast roar. The beast roar was so monstrous that it actually spread throughout the entire southern universe, alarming countless forces in the southern universe. The moment the beast roar was heard, the golden light dyed the entire southern universe's starry sky golden. Although it was only for a moment, it left an indelible impression on all the cultivators in the southern universe. A strange treasure has appeared? We have to go take a look. The golden light came from the west. Quickly go take a look. At this moment, many forces in the southern universe sent experts to the uninhabited planet where Zhuan was. They even alarmed some of the old bastards who were hiding in seclusion in the southern universe. One figure after another rushed over and gathered outside the uninhabited planet. At this moment, the uninhabited planet no longer emitted a golden light, and the beast roar disappeared. It looked just like an ordinary planet, but no one dared to let their guard down, because they knew that the beast roar that resounded throughout the entire southern universe came from this ordinary planet. Look, even the ancestor of the Qi cultivation sword sect, Xiao Ju Xiang, is here. Not only that Xiao Ju Xiang, even the ancestor of the Devil Pearl sect, Yang Zhonghui, is here. And the strongest rogue cultivator in the southern universe, Guangling Wanderer, is also here. These 3 people are all representatives of the southern universe's Void Sky 8 steps. At this moment, the 3 people floating at the front of the group immediately attracted everyone's attention. These 3 people were a middle-aged man with a sword on his back, an old beggar with disheveled hair, and the beautiful young woman, Yang Zhonghui. I heard that the Devil Pearl sect has been rebuilt. What happened? In the crowd, a younger cultivator asked the person beside him. How long has it been since you last came out? You don't even know this. More than 10 years ago, A cultivator named Zhuowen caused quite a stir in the star field. This kid first destroyed the Dark Illusion sect and the High Heaven sect in the Eastern Universe, then went to the Western Universe to devour the Heaven and Earth sect and the Void Peak. The Devil Pearl sect was even destroyed by Zhuowen's accomplices. Chapter 22:17. Xiao Zhu Xiang. Unfortunately, Yun was chased by Qin Changsheng and Fu Yuz, and was forced to enter the Starry Sky Fault. I'm afraid he's already dead. The heavens are really jealous of geniuses. Someone sighed. Many people in the surroundings also sighed silently. All the cultivators who knew about Zhuowen's deeds were full of admiration for Zhuowen, who they had never met before. Just think about it. How many rogue cultivators with no background could achieve such heaven-defying deeds as Zhuowen by relying on their own strength? At this moment, Yang Zhonghui, Xiao Zhu Xiang, and Guangling Sanren, who were standing in front of everyone, all looked at the uninhabited planet in front of them with serious gazes. Xiao Zhu Xiang took the lead and said, "I've checked. That golden light came from this uninhabited planet, so the treasure must be on this planet. Which of you two will go and take a look first?" Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren both cursed in their hearts, but Yang Zhonghui smiled tenderly and said, "Sect Master Xiao must be joking. Although there are treasures on this planet, it's definitely dangerous. For safety's sake, why don't the three of us go in together?" Sect Master Yang is right. The safest way is for three people to go in together. Guangling Sanren also agreed. Xiao Zhu Xiang looked at the two and frowned slightly, but finally nodded and said, "All right." After saying that, Xiao Zhu Xiang took out a defensive divine artifact, which surrounded his whole body, and took the lead to rush into the uninhabited planet. Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren also took out their own defensive divine artifacts, and followed closely behind Xiao Zhu Xiang, afraid that the good things would be taken away by Xiao Zhu Xiang if they were too late. As for the rest, none of them dared to go forward. They were very clear that any one of these three people could pinch them to death. If they dared to go over now, they would be courting death. Only after Xiao Zhu Xiang and the other two experts finished their selection did they dare to enter the planet to pick up the remaining treasures. However, just as the three of them approached the planet, a golden hand suddenly blasted out from the inside of the planet, heavily smashing into their chests. Because the appearance of this golden hand was too sudden, and Xiao Zhu Xiang and the other two were anxious to enter the planet to search for treasures, the three of them didn't expect that such a golden hand would appear on this planet. Pucci. The power of the golden hand was truly terrifying. The three of them, who were caught off guard, were directly hit by this huge hand. They let out a muffled groan and spat out mouthfuls of blood as they retreated continuously. The most miserable one was the Guangling Unfettered Cultivator. After all, the Guangling Unfettered Cultivator was the weakest of the three. He was only at the early stage of Void Heaven 8th step. At this moment, his hair was disheveled and his chest was stained with blood. He looked at the golden hand in shock. Yang Zhonghui and Xiao Zhu Xiang were both in the middle stage of the Void Sky 8 steps. They were slightly better than Guangling Sanren, but they also suffered some internal injuries. After Xiao Zhuexiang stabilized his body, he immediately cupped his hands towards the uninhabited planet in front of him and said apologetically, "Which fellow Taoist is cultivating on this planet?" "I am Xiao Zhuexiang, the ancestor of the Nanyu Qi training sword sect." Yang Zhonghui also hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist, please don't blame us. We misunderstood that there was a treasure here. I am Yang Zhonghui, the ancestor of the demonic pearl sect. I am Guangling's loose cultivator, please don't take offense." Guangling's loose cultivator hurriedly cupped his hands. The existence on the uninhabited planet was silent for a long time, then a sentence was transmitted, "Scram." When these words were spoken, the surrounding people were in an uproar, and Xiao Zhuexiang's gaze immediately became gloomy. Originally, Xiao Zhuexiang felt very unhappy when he was sneak attacked by the Golden Hand. However, he felt that the Golden Hand's power was not ordinary, so he lowered his body. It was just that the guy on this planet was really unreasonable. The moment he opened his mouth, he told him to scram. It was really too rude. Although his golden hand's power was not ordinary, if he, Xiao Juexiang, was serious, he might not necessarily be afraid of the golden hand. What reason did this person have to tell him to scram? Yang Zhonghui and Guangling's loose cultivator's complexion was not much better. After all, they were people with reputations in the Nanyu. If they really did as this person said to scram, they would not have any face left in the Nanyu. Fellow Taoist, aren't you going too far? Everyone only came here to look at the things on this planet. If there are no treasures on this planet, we will immediately leave and will not disturb you again. How about it? Xiao Juexiang resisted the unhappiness in his heart and said again. Unfortunately, the response this time was no longer words, but a golden hand that suddenly whistled toward Xiao Juexiang. Xiao Juexiang laughed in extreme anger and said, "Fellow Taoist is really arrogant. Do you really think that you are invincible? Today, I will find you and see what qualifications you have to be so arrogant." As he spoke, Xiao Juexiang's right hand patted the scabbard on his back. Suddenly, the sharp sword in the scabbard on his back rushed out. A sword light soared into the sky, like an endless waterfall hanging upside down. It was extremely terrifying. It's the Qi Cultivation Sword Sect's second heaven-breaking divine weapon, Through Heaven Sword. Looks like Xiao Juexiang is going to be serious. Guangling's loose cultivator and Yang Zhonghui could not help but retreat a few steps. Their gazes became a lot more serious. Strictly speaking, although Xiao Juexiang and Yang Zhonghui were both at the middle stage of the Void Sky 8th step, in terms of strength, Xiao Juexiang was still a level higher. Bang! Xiao Juexiang's right hand formed a sword seal. Suddenly, the divine sword with blazing sword light slashed down. The terrifying sword light that soared into the sky like a waterfall fell even more fiercely, heavily slashing on the golden hand. Only an earth-shattering collision sound resounded in the entire starry sky. Then, at the center of the collision, dense and terrifying ripples were produced. It was like a demonic sound, causing people to involuntarily cover their ears. This sword was extremely terrifying. The golden hand did not hold on for long before it was blasted into countless golden lights. Xiao Juexiang had his hands behind his back. The divine sword floated around his body. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked very confident and at ease. "Looks like you are useless. If you only have this little bit of ability, what qualifications do you have to tell us to scram?" Xiao Juexiang said rather disdainfully. Yang Zhonghui and Guangling's loose cultivator also relaxed. What they were most afraid of was that the cultivators of the uninhabited planet were too strong. They might not be their opponents. Now, it seemed that they were thinking too much. The surrounding cultivators were in an uproar. There were even some female cultivators who looked at Xiao Juexiang's back. They were all suffused with peach blossoms and screamed incessantly. Obviously, they were amazed by Xiao Juexiang's sword just now. Xiao Juexiang was also quite proud. He cast a sidelong glance at the uninhabited planet and continued, "Still not coming out? Cowering, do you want to continue to be a coward?" Unfortunately, what echoed in Xiao Juexiang's mind was still silence. Gutless guy. I'll drag you out now." As he spoke, Xiao Juexiang's body was surrounded by a divine sword. He took a step forward and rushed toward the planet in front of him. However, the moment Xiao Juexiang entered the planet, invisible ripples appeared around him and instantly wrapped him in it. Trap and kill array? Xiao Juexiang's gaze focused. He immediately discovered that this invisible ripple was a trap and kill array. "You only know how to use this kind of sinister move." Xiao Juexiang's mouth was full of a sneer. Just as he finished speaking, a gust of wind suddenly swept from behind him. The speed was too fast. Xiao Juexiang did not even have time to react. Puchi! Xiao Juexiang spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes revealed a look of shock. Just as he was about to turn around and attack, another gust of wind came from in front of him. Its aura was not the slightest bit weaker than Su Tianba Deng. A fist ruthlessly smashed onto Xiao Juexiang's chest. Xiao Juexiang's divine sword, unknowingly, was grabbed by a black-clothed youth. Chapter 22:18. Design. Who are you? Xiao Xiong looked at the black-clothed youth in fear. Are you the ancestor of the Qi refinement sword sect, Xiao Xiong? Zhuan looked at Xiao Xiong and asked. Xiao Xiong calmed down a little. He thought that the name of the Qi cultivation sword sect had intimidated Zhuan. He said in a deep voice, Yes, I am Xiao Xiong of the Qi cultivation sword sect. Fellow Taoist and I will mind our own business. I hope fellow Taoist can forgive me this time. Leave an arm behind. Zhuan said calmly. Xiao Xiong's face turned ugly. Zhuan's words were undoubtedly asking him to slap his own face. However, Xiao Xiong quickly noticed Chen Changxing, who was standing beside Zhuan, and couldn't help but ask in surprise, Brother Chen, why are you here? Chen Changxing's eyes flashed. He didn't really want to see Xiao Xiong, but he had to listen to Zhuan's orders. That was why he attacked together with the Emperor Spirit when Xiao Xiong entered the array. Now that Xiao Xiong recognized him, Chen Changxing had no choice but to step forward. He sighed and said, Brother Xiao, I advise you to listen to this Lord's words and break your own arm. Otherwise, you will only suffer. Xiao Xiong's gaze became more and more unimaginable. He was very clear about Chen Changxing's cultivation level. The ancestor of the Heaven and Earth sect was an expert at the late stage of the Void Sky 8 steps. But now, Chen Changxing was actually respectful to this black-clothed youth. Moreover, from Chen Changxing's attack, it could be seen that Chen Changxing was working for this black-clothed youth. From this, it could be seen that this black-clothed youth wasn't simple. After thinking about it, Xiao Xiong finally decided to break his own arm. After all, he wasn't even a match for Chen Changxing. Adding on the Emperor's Spirit and this mysterious black-clothed youth, he was even less of a match for them. Just as Xiao Xiong was about to break his own arm, Zhuan stopped him. Seeing Xiao Xiong looking at him doubtfully, Zhuan smiled and said, Sect Master Xiao, I have something I need you to do. If you help me, not only will I not need you to break your arm, I will also give you some benefits. Outside the uninhabited planet, many of the surrounding cultivators were discussing spiritedly. Xiao Xiong had been in there for a long time, and he still had not come out. Could it be that there was a problem? The Guangling Sanren and Yang Zhonghui looked at each other, their gazes solemn. Others might not be able to tell what had just happened, but that didn't mean that the two of them couldn't. Just now, when Xiao Xiong entered the uninhabited planet, invisible ripples rose from the surface. Clearly, someone had arranged a powerful formation on this uninhabited planet. From the moment Xiao Xiong entered until now, he still hadn't appeared. One could imagine how powerful this formation was. Just as Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren were considering whether or not to enter the uninhabited planet like Xiao Xiong, a figure suddenly appeared from the interior of the planet. Everyone's gazes converged and coincidentally saw that this figure was Xiao Xiong, who had previously entered the planet. Brother Xiao, is there any treasure on this planet? When I saw you enter just now, there were fluctuations of a formation outside. Is there still a powerful formation on this planet? Yang Zhonghui hurriedly asked. Xiao Xiong said rather cautiously, Sect Master Yang is right. There is indeed a large formation inside this planet. Moreover, this formation is quite powerful. I was entangled by this formation for a long time before I barely managed to escape. However, I also found some good things inside. What good things? Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren's interest was immediately aroused. A temple with the aura of the heavenly way. I can't open this temple with my strength alone. I need the help of the two of you. Xiao Xiong seemed to be mysterious as he transmitted his voice. When Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren heard this, they immediately couldn't hold it in. They didn't expect that there would be a temple emitting the aura of the heavenly way hidden in this uninhabited planet. However, what was this temple like? With the faint aura of the heavenly way, the two of them knew that this temple was definitely not simple. There must be a lot of good things inside the temple. Brother Xiao, is this absolutely true? Yang Zhonghui asked in a deep voice. Xiao Xiong looked at Yang Zhonghui with a complicated expression. He nodded firmly and said, Don't worry, the two of you. This is absolutely true. This Xiao has no need to deceive you. Brother Xiao, I'll go in with you, Guangling Sanren said with a trembling voice. Guangling Sanren was not a fool. He was very clear that a temple with the aura of the heavenly way definitely had good things. There might even be treasures related to the heavenly way inside. One had to know that the heavenly way was extremely tempting to people like them who had reached the 8 void heaven steps. After all, if they wanted to reach the 9 void heaven steps, they had to comprehend the heavenly way's rules. Yang Zhonghui saw Guangling Sanren immediately agree. She no longer hesitated and said in a deep voice, Brother Xiao, you lead the way. I'll go with you. Xiao Zhuxiang nodded. He didn't waste any time and brought the two of them to the uninhabited planet. Many cultivators in the surroundings could only watch as the three of them entered the planet. From Xiao Zhuxiang's expression just now, many people could see that there was definitely something good on this planet. Unfortunately, in front of Xiao Zhuxiang and the other two experts, how could these people dare to snatch food from the tiger's mouth? They would thank the heavens and earth if they could leave some soup for them. This is trap and kill array? The instant Xiao Zhuxiang brought Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren to the planet, Yang Zhonghui immediately sensed the aura of the array in front of them. Xiao Zhuxiang nodded and said calmly, Previously, I was trapped in that trap and kill array. This trap and kill array was quite powerful. However, it was only an array after all. I still managed to break through it. And that temple is just opposite of the trap and kill array. After saying that, Guangling Sanren and Yang Zhonghui's eyes immediately revealed a blazing color. The two of them had long been attracted by the temple that Xiao Zhuxiang spoke of. They simply didn't notice the loophole in Xiao Zhuxiang's words. Now let's go in. After Xiao Zhuxiang finished speaking, he stepped into the trap and kill array in front of them. Invisible ripples formed. Soon after, Xiao Zhuxiang's entire person disappeared within the ripples. Clearly, he had entered the interior of the trap and kill array. Seeing Xiao Zhuxiang enter the trap and kill array so straightforwardly, Yang Zhonghui and Guangling Sanren also completely let down their last bit of defense. One after another, they entered the trap and kill array. Once they entered the trap and kill array, waves of killing qi assaulted their faces. Guangling Sanren and Yang Zhonghui immediately took out their defensive divine tools to resist the powerful attacks from the surroundings. Where's Brother Xiao? How come he's gone? After Guangling Sanren took out his defensive magic tool, he began to pay attention to his surroundings. He discovered that there was no trace of Xiao Zhuxiang. Chapter 2219. Kill so. All of a sudden, 3 figures shot over from 3 different directions of the confinement killing formation like arrows leaving the bowstring. One of them charged towards Guangling Sanren, while the other 2 charged towards Yang Zhonghui in a pincer attack. Because the 3 of them were too fast, and because of the protection of the trap and kill array, Guangling Sanren and Yang Zhonghui were not prepared at all. When the 3 figures charged out, the 2 immediately fell into a passive state. A terrifying halberd shadow ruthlessly shot towards Guangling's loose cultivator. This attack was extremely fast and extremely accurate. Guangling's loose cultivator blocked it in an extremely sorry state and continuously retreated. Yang Zhonghui was the unluckiest, because she was being attacked by 2 figures. Moreover, the strength of these 2 figures was extremely terrifying, not at all weaker than Yang Zhonghui. One of them even had an aura that was stronger than Yang Zhonghui. Yang Zhonghui immediately took out her secondary heaven-shattering divine artifact, the embroidery needle. The end of the embroidery needle was threaded with a red thread. Then, the red thread followed the needle and burst out, turning into a needle shadow in midair. The red thread instantly intertwined into a red net-like object, blocking in front of Yang Zhonghui like a shield. However, the instant the embroidery needle intertwined the red net, a divine sword with many inscriptions on its body fiercely slashed over. The inscriptions seemed to come alive, heavily smashing into the red net. Soon after, a terrifying explosion sounded, and a hole was instantly torn open in the red net. Only now did Yang Zhonghui clearly see the true appearance of the divine sword, and could not help but cry out in alarm, "Qin Changsheng?" Didn't you fall into a spatial fault? The one holding the divine sword was Qin Chang Sheng, and the divine sword in his hand was the 9 Extinction Divine Rune Sword. Zhuan had temporarily allowed Qin Chang Sheng to use it, in hopes that he would quickly take down Yang Zhonghui. Qin Chang Sheng's face was as calm as water, ignoring Yang Zhonghui's words. He held the sword in his right hand and fiercely slashed out. The sword light was like water, like an inverted waterfall, fiercely pouring down, heavily smashing down in front of Yang Zhonghui. The red net, which already had holes in it, finally couldn't withstand the sword strike and shattered into countless red powder. Yang Zhonghui groaned and had no choice but to retreat. Unfortunately, the moment she retreated, she suddenly felt a fierce gust of wind sweeping towards her from behind. Yang Zhonghui's spiritual mind happened to discover that the one who attacked her from behind was Xiao Juexiang, who invited her and Guangling Sanren to enter the uninhabited planet. He saw that the divine sword on Xiao Juexiang's back had already been unsheathed. Like a stream of light, it quickly swept over. It cut a dazzling trace in the air and directly slashed towards Yang Zhonghui. Yang Zhonghui sighed in her heart. She was not an idiot. Now that she saw Xiao Juexiang taking action against her, how could she not know that Xiao Juexiang purposely lured her here? Brother Xiao, give me a reason. Yang Zhonghui barely managed to block Xiao Juexiang's attack. He looked at Xiao Juexiang calmly and asked coldly. Xiao Juexiang shook his head and said somewhat helplessly, Junior Yang, this wasn't my idea. I was forced to do this because I had no other choice. After saying this, Xiao Juexiang's movements were not slow. His divine sword was like flowing water. It stabbed out and continued to sweep towards Yang Zhonghui. Qin Chang Sheng's 9 Extinction Divine Rune Sword also slashed out a terrifying sword light, forming a crescent shape and fiercely rushed over. With the two of them working together, Yang Zhonghui was simply not a match. After a few rounds, Yang Zhonghui was defeated. On the other side, Guangling Sanren was simply unable to defeat the spirit. He hurriedly begged for mercy, not daring to make any strange movements. However, in his heart he was secretly complaining. Wasn't he just here to look for treasure? How could he still encounter such a situation? He was really unlucky. Qin Chang Sheng, what is going on? Why are you attacking me? Yang Zhonghui looked at Qin Chang Sheng angrily and said. Qin Chang Sheng, however, didn't pay any attention to the enraged Yang Zhonghui. Instead, he respectfully bowed towards the front and respectfully said, Master, this Yang Zhonghui has been captured. How does Master intend to deal with her? Dang dang dang. The crisp sound of footsteps rang out, and a slender young man in black clothes walked out from the shadows. The moment Yang Zhonghui saw Zhuan, her beautiful eyes were glazed over. She didn't move at all. She said hoarsely, Zhuan? You're not dead? That's not right. Yang Zhonghui immediately realized that something was wrong. Zhuan's aura was much stronger than before. Looking at the attitude of Qin Chang Sheng and Xiao Juexiang, it was obvious that they were in awe of Zhuan. Especially Qin Chang Sheng, who actually called Zhuan master. Could it be that Qin Chang Sheng had become Zhuan's servant? But that didn't make any sense. Who was Qin Chang Sheng? He was an elder of the Heaven and Earth sect. He was stronger than Yang Zhonghui, and yet he had become Zhuan's servant. Yang Zhonghui couldn't believe that Zhuan had such an ability, but the facts in front of her made her believe it. Ancestor Yang, long time no see. Zhuan slowly walked in front of Yang Zhonghui and looked at Yang Zhonghui with a warm smile. When the latter saw the warm smile on Zhuan's face, he actually felt a chill down his spine. Zhuan, what do you want? You've already destroyed the Devil Pearl sect. Do you still want to kill me? Yang Zhonghui said in a deep voice. Don't tell me that I shouldn't kill you? Zhuan sneered. Back then, when Yang Zhonghui was chasing after him, he did not have any intention of showing mercy. If not for old man Wuqing causing trouble in the Devil Pearl sect and forcing Yang Zhonghui to leave, Zhuan would not have been able to deal with 3 ancestor-level experts. Now that Yang Zhonghui said such words, Zhuan felt that it was extremely laughable. Yang Zhonghui's gaze immediately darkened. She hurriedly said, Hun, don't go too far. With that, an extremely terrifying aura erupted from Yang Zhonghui's body. This aura became stronger and stronger, and a golden whirlwind violently rose from Yang Zhonghui's body. Rumble! A thunderous explosion rang out, and Yang Zhonghui's aura instantly rose to the late stage of the Void Heaven stage, infinitely close to the peak of the Void Heaven stage. Chen Changxing and Xiao Juxiang, who were originally surrounding Yang Zhonghui, did not notice at all and were immediately blown away by the terrifying golden whirlwind. Jun, I won't let you off. In the future, if I, Yang Zhonghui, don't die, I will definitely kill you. Yang Zhonghui looked at Zhuowen with resentment, then used the strange golden whirlwind to quickly rush out of the planet. Furthermore, the surrounding powerful confinement and killing array was actually unable to withstand the power of the golden whirlwind and collapsed inch by inch. Zhuowen's gaze congealed. This Yang Zhonghui had actually used a secret technique to increase his strength. The cultivators who were originally watching outside naturally heard Yang Zhonghui's venomous voice. Especially when they heard Zhuowen's name, many cultivators burst into an uproar. They were not unfamiliar with the name Zhuowen. It was like thunder in their ears. Back then, he was a guy who had caused a sensation in the star field. Could it be that the person on this planet was that Zhuowen? That Yang Zhonghui came out. Heavens, why is this Yang Zhonghui's aura so powerful? I'm afraid she has already reached the late stage of the Void Heaven stage, very close to the peak of the Void Heaven stage, right? The moment Yang Zhonghui swept out of the planet with the terrifying golden whirlwind, many cultivators were shocked. It was obvious that Yang Zhonghui, who had used a secret technique, was indeed extremely terrifying. Unfortunately, the moment Yang Zhonghui escaped from the planet, a terrifying golden claw that could split the heavens and earth suddenly smashed down from above Yang Zhonghui. Chapter 2220. Dong Yudi Ling, Chen Changxing, and Xiao Juexiang, who were in the trap and kill array, stared blankly at Yang Zhonghui, who had been blasted into smithereens. Although Yang Zhonghui's cultivation wasn't particularly high, she had used a secret technique to forcibly raise her cultivation to the peak of the Void Sky 8th step. Although there was a big gap between her and a true expert of the Void Sky 8th step, she was still stronger than Chen Changxing, who was at the late stage of the Void Sky 8th step. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to escape from the joint attack of Chen Changxing and Xiao Juexiang so easily. Zhuowen looked calm on the surface, but he was quite shocked in his heart. On this uninhabited planet, he had already used up the royal blood essence, and the royal bloodline in his body had also completely awakened. It could be said that he was now a true Devourer King. Although his strength didn't seem to have increased by much on the surface, his physical body was actually much stronger than before. The claw just now was condensed by Zhuowen using all of Devourer King's strength. The power of that attack was comparable to the peak of the Void Sky 8th step, and even stronger than an ordinary peak of the Void Sky 8th step. Even if Yang Zhonghui had used a secret technique to raise her cultivation, she still couldn't block Zhuowen's strongest attack condensed from the royal bloodline. After experiencing the terrifying power of the royal bloodline's strongest attack, Zhuowen thought that this move was his final trump card. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it was best not to reveal it. He was very clear that Devourer King was more precious than Devour. If it was Devour, even if others recognized it, they wouldn't care too much. After all, true experts wouldn't care much about Devour. However, if it was Devourer King, who was one level higher than Devour, even the Lord of Heaven domain might not be able to resist the temptation. In fact, after Zhuowen found out that Devour had the royal bloodline, he started to be wary of Tai Ching and Sakyamuni. He didn't know whether the two of them knew that his clone had the royal bloodline. If they didn't know, Zhuowen wouldn't be worried. However, if the two of them knew about it, Zhuowen felt that he was in a bad situation. Although Devour had awakened his royal bloodline and was much stronger than before, Zhuowen was no match for Great Brahma, who was the weakest among the 8 heavens, let alone Great Pure One and Great Brahma, who were two formidable experts. Of course, whether Zhuowen's idea was true or not was another matter. However, he knew that he had to be more cautious. It would be best if he didn't fail miserably. Master, your subordinate has failed. Please punish me. Chen Changxing saw that after Zhuan killed Yang Zhonghui, he had actually sunk into deep thought and was even frowning. Chen Changxing couldn't help but feel his heart tremble, and he went forward to ask for forgiveness. Seeing this, the king's spirit hurriedly followed behind Chen Changxing in fear and trepidation. As for Xiao Zhuxiang, he stood there in a daze. However, he couldn't erase the scene of Yang Zhonghui being killed from his mind. He was very clear that although the black-clothed youth in front of him looked harmless, the energy contained in his body was too terrifying. It wasn't something he could contend against. Zhuan waved his hand, indicating that he didn't mind. Then he looked at Xiao Zhuxiang and said indifferently, "Sect Master Xiao, thank you for your help this time. You can go now." Zhuan was a person who clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred. Xiao Zhuxiang had no enmity with him. The previous offense had been offset in the process of seducing Yang Zhonghui. Naturally, he wouldn't do anything to Xiao Zhuxiang. Xiao Zhuxiang sighed in his heart. He cupped his fists at Zhuan and left. Guangling's loose cultivator opened his mouth. He looked at Zhuan in fear, but in the end he didn't dare to speak. Scram! Zhuan looked at Guangling's loose cultivator indifferently and spat out these words. The latter hurriedly bid farewell and left in a hurry. "Master, where are we going next?" Chen Changxing asked carefully. "Let's go back to Dongyu first," Zhuowen said as he took out a flying ship. The group then boarded the flying ship. 3 months later, outside the Heavenly Demon Island in the Eastern Universe, the Heavenly Demon Island's ancestor Magatama and the sect master, Emoji, led a group of Heavenly Demon Island's upper echelons to line up in the starry sky outside the Heavenly Demon Island. From the looks of it, it was as though the Heavenly Devil Island was welcoming an extremely important guest. Many disciples of the Heavenly Devil Island were pointing their fingers and discussing the identity of the guest that the old ancestor of the Heavenly Devil Island was personally welcoming. "Ancestor, Brother Zhuo really sent you a message?" Mo Fan, who was standing beside Emoji, asked excitedly. Magatama nodded and smiled. "Yes. That kid is really powerful. Wasn't there a rumor that he fell into a fault in the starry sky and his whereabouts were unknown? If that kid didn't send me a message, I wouldn't even know that he had come out." Emoji, however, said doubtfully, "Ancestor, the fault in the starry sky is a well-known dangerous place. I've never heard of anyone who fell into a fault in the starry sky and came out. Do you think?" Magatama shook his head and said, "Don't worry, I've checked. This message was indeed sent by our young friend Zhuan. This kid is really not simple. He's definitely the first person I've seen to be able to come out of a fault in the starry sky." Hearing Magatama's words, Emoji was even more surprised. No wonder Magatama asked them to come out and welcome Zhuan. It seemed that Zhuan had really escaped from the fault in the starry sky. Mo Fan and Yushan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They realized that the gap between them and Zhuan seemed to be widening. They had to admit that Zhuan was really too abnormal. Not long after, a stream of light came from the distant starry sky and finally stopped in front of Magatama and the others. It was an ordinary flying ship, but the moment it stopped, Magatama took the lead and walked forward, laughing. "Ha, my young friend Zhuan, how have you been? First of all, congratulations on leaving the fault in the starry sky." After Emotion finished his statement, a figure slowly walked down from the flying ship. He was wearing clothes that were whiter than snow and had a graceful bearing. It was Zhuowen who had rushed back from the South Universe. Behind Zhuowen were 6 people, led by Chen Changxing and Di Ling. Behind them were Chao Tairan, Zhang Jiqing, Song Binhong, and Lu Manfeng. These 6 people were all Zhuowen's servants, and the weakest of them was at least Void Sky 7 steps. The strongest, Chen Changxing, was at the late stage of Void Sky 8 steps. This lineup was no weaker than the higher-ups of Sky Demon Island. If Zhuowen's doppelganger was included, the strength of Zhuowen's group was definitely stronger than Sky Demon Island's. Emotion immediately noticed Chen Changxing, who was following behind Zhuowen. Emotion's eyes revealed astonishment, but he didn't take the liberty to ask. Instead, his impression of Zhuowen increased. From Chen Changxing's actions, Magatama could see that Chen Changxing had become Zhuowen's servant. Chapter 22-21. Heavenly Divine Pelichuan cupped his hands towards Magatama and said with a smile, "Senior Magatama is too courteous. You actually brought out such a huge lineup to welcome me. I'm truly in awe." Magatama flicked his sleeves and laughed. "Shuxiaoyu is too courteous. It's only right for me to bring out such a huge lineup. After all, you're an important guest of my heavenly Devil Island. Oh right, I've already arranged a guest room for you." Juan nodded and chatted with Magatama for a while. At the same time, he greeted Mo Fan and Yushan before he was led into the heavenly Devil Island by Magatama. In a quiet courtyard, Juan sat cross-legged on a praying mat while Magatama sat on a stool opposite Juan. He was flipping through a jade slip with his brows slightly furrowed. "Senior Mo, could it be that you don't recognize the location of the map recorded in this jade slip?" Juan looked at Magatama with his brows slightly furrowed and couldn't help but ask in a deep voice. Magatama's eyes flickered and he sighed softly. "The map in your jade slip is a little unfamiliar to me. I can guarantee that it's definitely not the location of the Great Brahma domain." Juan furrowed his brows. The map he gave Magatama was naturally the location of the space-time key he obtained from the Devourer King. Of course, Juan didn't show the real map to Magatama. Instead, he copied the map himself and made some changes to it. The space-time key was extremely important. Juan didn't dare to speak carelessly, lest he caused unnecessary trouble. Now that Magatama didn't recognize the location on the map, it seemed like the space-time key wasn't within the Great Brahma domain. However, what troubled Juan was that he had only been to the Huaxia Heaven domain and the Great Brahma Heaven domain. Moreover, he had only been to a few places in the Huaxia Heaven domain and was not familiar with them at all. Even the Great Brahma realm that he stayed the most in, Juan was not particularly familiar with it. After all, a heaven realm was so big, it was impossible for him to go to every place, right? That was impossible. However, from the map you gave me, it seems that this map contains a very dangerous starry sky. Look at the shadows marked on the map. If my guess is correct, they should be spatial dimensional distortions. These things are no joke. Once you are sucked in, you will die without a doubt. It is much more terrifying than a starry sky fault. Magatama pointed at the shadowy areas on the map. His eyes were extremely solemn as he continued, "Shuxiaoyu, where did you get this map? It's obvious that this isn't a good place. Could it be that there's something important here?" Juan smiled faintly and said, "I got this by accident. Maybe there's a treasure inside? I'm just trying my luck. Since Senior Mo doesn't know, then forget it." Magatama looked deeply at Juan and said, "How about this? Although I don't know the exact location of this map, if you have all the starry sky maps of the 8 heaven realms, you should be able to find the exact location of this map. And if you have all the starry sky maps of the 8 heaven realms, I know that the Heaven Realm Lords basically have their own collections." Juan shook his head. Although he had interacted with the 3 Heaven Realm Lords, Tai Ching, Great Brahma, and Sakyamuni, he knew that the chances of getting all the starry sky maps of the 8 Heaven Realms from the 3 of them were slim. Sakyamuni originally had a grudge with him. If he went to the Sakyamuni domain, he would be courting death. Moreover, he had cut off his master-disciple relationship with Tai Ching. It was even more impossible for him to ask Tai Ching for these things. As for Great Brahma, Juan didn't have a good impression of him, so he didn't consider him. Magatama smiled and said, "Other than that, I know that Great Brahma has the starry sky maps of the 8 heaven realms with Uezu from Half Moon Hall. However, Uezu's starry sky map isn't complete. He might not be able to find the location on this map." Juan's eyes lit up. He said in surprise, "If Uezu really has it, then that's great. It seems like I need to make a trip to North U." Magatama nodded and said, "The ancient teleportation formation of Heavenly Devil Island has been repaired. Shuxiaoyu can use our ancient teleportation formation to teleport directly to North U." At this point, Magatama's eyes flickered as if there was something that he couldn't say. "Senior Mo, if you have something to say, feel free to say it to me," Juan said with a smile. Magatama said a little awkwardly, "Actually, I have 5 Empyrean divine pills in my hands. They are things that I have kept for a long time. I want to exchange them with Zhuo Xiaoyu. What do you think? Zhuan was startled and immediately revealed a look of ecstasy. The Empyrean Divine Pills were precious divine pills that could help one advance to the Void Sky sixth step. The Void Sky sixth step was called Empyrean Unification. It meant that the soul and physical body would become one, allowing the power of the soul and physical body to combine perfectly. However, the soul and physical body were actually two different substances. It was relatively difficult to combine them. Most cultivators who reached the Void Sky fifth step were unable to grasp the degree of combining the soul and physical body. Therefore, they were a little bit away from the Void Sky sixth step and were stuck at the Void Sky fifth step. The function of the Empyrean Divine Pill was to neutralize the gap between the physical body and the soul, allowing the two to perfectly combine. Once the soul and physical body were perfectly combined, the cultivator only needed to have enough energy to completely break through to the Void Sky sixth step. The success rate was extremely high. It could be said that the Empyrean Divine Pill was extremely precious to cultivators who reached the Void Sky fifth step. Currently, Yuan had never seen such a divine pill. Magatama taking out the Empyrean Divine Pills was a timely rein for Zhuan. Senior Mo, what do you want to exchange? Zhuan calmed down and asked Magatama. Magatama said with a smile, Zhuo Xiaoyu can make the decision. This thing may be precious to you, but it's not precious to me. How about this? You give me a drop of Heavenly Domain Star Essence. Zhuan waved his sleeve and took out a jade bottle and handed it to Magatama. Senior Mo, there are 5 drops of Heavenly Domain Star Essence in this bottle. 1 drop of Heavenly Domain Star Essence for 1 Empyrean Divine Pill. Magatama received the jade bottle with a face full of surprise. He really did intend to exchange for a drop of Heavenly Domain Star Essence. These 5 Empyrean Divine Pills couldn't compare to the Heavenly Domain Star Essence. In Magatama's eyes, using these 5 Empyrean Divine Pills to exchange for a drop of Heavenly Domain Star Essence was already a bargain. He didn't expect that Zhuan would directly give him 5 drops of Heavenly Domain Star Essence. How could he not be surprised? Little friend Zhuo, this Mo will remember this favor of yours. If you have any problems in the future, feel free to look for this Mo. If this Mo is able to help, this Mo will definitely help you and will not decline. Mo Tian immediately patted his chest and laughed heartily. Zhuan waved his hand and said with a smile, Senior Mo is too polite. In fact, this Zhuo has always been grateful for Senior Mo's help. Otherwise, how could this Zhuo leave Dong Yu under the encirclement of Chen Changxing and Fu Yu's? Chapter 22-22. Mysterious Woman. After Magatama left, Yuan decided to go into seclusion. If he hadn't obtained the celestial pill, he would have gone to the northern universe immediately. However, since he had obtained the celestial pill, he wasn't in such a hurry. He planned to use the celestial pill to advance to the 6th step virtual sky first. Zhuowen spent a total of 3 months in seclusion. Finally, a terrifying invisible ripple suddenly appeared in his originally motionless pavilion. An aura as vast as the abyss suddenly soared into the sky. In the attic, Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze contained a distant and vicissitudes of life. At that moment, Zhuowen had completely fused his soul and body together. Furthermore, the moment they fused together, Zhuowen discovered that both his soul and body were transforming. If one observed carefully, this transformation was a mutual process. The power of the body was fed back to the divine soul, causing the divine soul to grow continuously. The power of the divine soul acted on the body, causing Zhuowen's physical strength to grow as well. Of course, compared to the transformation of the divine soul, the transformation of Zhuowen's body was insignificant. In Zhuowen's divine soul space, there were continuous rumbling sounds, as if countless bombs were exploding at the same time. Then, more than 3,000 divine soul galaxies exploded into 2 halves. Then, the 2 halves of the divine soul galaxy began to merge and transform into a complete divine soul galaxy. In other words, 1 divine soul galaxy evolved into 2 divine soul galaxies. In an instant, The Divine Soul galaxies in Zhuowen's Divine Soul space transformed from more than 3,000 to more than 6,000. His Divine Soul was more than twice as powerful as before. Celestial Unity, it's time to step onto the 6th step of the virtual sky bridge. Zhuowen stood up. The aura in his body suddenly soared into the sky. Then, a purple light soared into the sky and condensed into a vast virtual sky bridge in the void. Zhuowen reached the sky in one step and jumped onto the 5th step of the virtual sky bridge. Then he stepped onto the 6th step. Because Zhuowen's divine soul and body had merged perfectly, reaching the terrifying celestial unity stage, it wasn't difficult for him to step onto the 6th step. Zhuowen didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but the moment he stepped onto the 6th step of the ethereal bridge, he faintly felt that the purple light of the ethereal bridge under his feet was even brighter than before. When Zhuowen successfully reached the 6th step of the virtual sky bridge, Magatama also came out of secluded cultivation. Although Zhuowen's advancement caused a huge commotion, Zhuowen had placed down a powerful restriction in the surroundings beforehand. The ripples did not spread out at all, so there were very few people on Heavenly Devil Island who knew of his advancement. For Motion to be able to come, it should be because he sensed Zhuowen's advancement. Zhuowen put away the virtual sky bridge. With a wave of his sleeve, he put away the formation around him. Magatama's laughter sounded. Xiaoyu, your advancement is really fast. How long has it been? Zhuowen cupped his hands and said, Senior Mo is too polite. I was just lucky. If it wasn't for the celestial divine pellet, I wouldn't have been able to advance. Although Zhuowen's words were polite, he was really grateful to Magatama. He was actually quite far away from reaching the 6th step of the virtual sky bridge. He couldn't have advanced with just one celestial divine pellet, but Magatama gave him 5. He used a total of 5 celestial divine pellets to finally merge his divine soul and body perfectly, promoting the celestial unity stage to reach the 6th step of the virtual sky bridge. Senior Mo, please borrow the ancient teleportation formation, Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Magatama nodded and said, Xiaoyu, be careful when you go to North U. What do you mean? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Motion had a serious gaze as he said, 3 months before you left the spatial fault, a terrifying battle occurred in the Middle Universe Great Brahma Heavenly Palace. This battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, and it extended all the way to the North Universe. North U's White Jade Tower and Flower Butterfly Valley were turned into ruins. There were countless casualties. Although the ancestors of the two forces didn't die, they escaped with heavy injuries. Fortunately, the Half Moon Hall is the #1 sect of the 10 great sections. With Yuezu, a half-step virtual sky bridge expert, they barely managed to resist the aftermath of the battle. Because of that battle, North U became very unstable. The Half Moon Hall also didn't manage it. Xiaoyu, be careful when you go there. Although you shouldn't be able to do anything with your strength, it's best to be cautious. Zhuowen was more and more surprised as he listened. Great battle with the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace? Which terrifying expert was it? Could it be an expert of the virtual sky bridge 9 steps? What was the result of the battle? Magatama nodded and said, other than an expert of the virtual sky bridge 9 steps, I don't think there's any other possibility. As for the result, I'm not very clear. It said that the one who fought with the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace was a beautiful woman. After that, it said that the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace went into seclusion after the battle. Obviously, he didn't gain much from the battle, and the beautiful woman's whereabouts are unknown. Zhuowen was secretly shocked. He didn't expect that there would be an expert in the Great Brahma region who could fight with the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace. Although Zhuowen had many trump cards and was powerful, he was still an ant when facing an expert of the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace's level. It was impossible for him to be the opponent. Unless Zhuowen's original body advanced to the virtual sky bridge 9 steps, or his clone advanced to the 3 extremes, it would be difficult for him to challenge the virtual sky bridge 9 steps. Not to mention him, even the half-step virtual sky bridge 9 steps expert of the Half Moon Hall, Yuezu, was an ant that could be killed with a flip of his hand in the eyes of the Great Brahma Heavenly Palace. Many thanks for Senior Mo's reminder. I wonder if Senior Mo has an image of the battle? Can you show it to me? Zhuowen asked curiously. Mo Tian took out a crystal ball and said, back then, when the two experts were fighting, someone used a crystal ball to record it. However, as it was too far away, they could only see the indistinct figures of the two of them fighting. Zhuowen cupped his fists and immediately inserted his divine power into the crystal ball. Immediately, an image appeared in it. It was an empty starry sky. Far away in the starry sky, waves of starry sky storms swept through wantonly. They were like sharp and terrifying wind blades that burst out in all directions. It looked extremely terrifying. In that terrifying starry sky storm, two vague figures were fighting continuously. Although Zhuowen wasn't personally nearby, he could clearly see how terrifying the battle was through this image. The surrounding starry sky continued to shatter and collapse, shattering into a terrifying darkness of nothingness. Invisible ripples spread out in all directions like water ripples. It looked extremely terrifying. As the cultivator recording the crystal ball was too far away, one could only vaguely recognize a tall figure with 3 heads and 6 arms. It was the great Brahma heavenly palace that he had met in Zhongyu. Chapter 22-23. Danger Zone. But the more Zhuowen looked at her, the more he frowned. The woman's back seemed familiar to him, but at the same time, unfamiliar. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his wife Mu Qinshue's back was extremely similar to this woman's. However, he quickly laughed at himself. How could Mu Qinshue's cultivation be so terrifying that she could actually fight an expert like Lord Brahma alone? Although Zhuowen didn't think it could be Mu Qinshu, he was still worried. He decided that after this trip to Northern Yu, he would return to the far west to take a look. Senior, can I have a copy of this crystal ball? Zhuowen asked Magatama. Magatama smiled politely and said, it's just a crystal ball. If Xiaoyu likes it, you can have it. Thank you, Brother Mo. Zhuowen put away the crystal ball and thanked him gratefully. The two of them chatted as they walked, and soon they were near the ancient teleporter of Heavenly Demon Island. King Spirit, Qin Changxing, and the other servants were already waiting nearby. When they saw Zhuowen, they bowed respectfully. Mo Tian arrived in front of the ancient teleportation array and formed seals with both hands. He struck out an extremely complicated hand seal. Immediately after, outside of the complicated ancient teleportation array, there was actually a burst of extremely terrifying blazing radiance. There was even a trace of vicissitudes of aura. Thank you, Senior Mo. Zhuowen bowed and led King Spirit, Qin Changxing, and the others into the teleport. A white light shot up into the sky and teleported them away. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, what appeared before him was an unfamiliar starry sky. Master, this is the ancient teleporter of Northern Yu. Why did Magatama send us here? Why didn't he send us directly to the teleporter of Half Moon Hall? Qin Changxing looked around and frowned. Zhuowen waved his sleeve and said indifferently, Half Moon Hall's ancient teleportation array has malfunctioned, and it's related to the previous battle. That's why Senior Mo teleported us to this boundary. It's safer this way. Qin Changxing didn't dare to speak carelessly. He had heard about the battle between Zhongyu and Beiyu back on Heavenly Demon Island. He was also quite shocked. Since when did an expert who could challenge Great Brahma appear in Great Brahma? You guys enter the Zhonglan's secret realm first. Zhuowen said calmly. Qin Changxing, Di Ling, and the others did not dare disobey, so they all entered the Zhonglan's secret territory. Zhuowen then took out an airship and flew towards the Half Moon Hall. 3 days later, Zhuowen stopped the flying ship. Many cultivators had gathered in the starry sky ahead. Moreover, he had discovered that the starry sky ahead was completely different from the ordinary starry sky. After getting off the flying ship, Zhuowen walked forward. Many of the surrounding cultivators looked at Zhuowen with reverence in their eyes. Zhuowen's powerful aura was not restrained at all. These ordinary cultivators could tell at a glance that Zhuowen was not simple. When he got closer, Zhuowen was shocked to discover that the starry sky ahead had completely shattered. It had become a terrifying and dangerous zone filled with endless starry sky wind blades. Moreover, the area of this zone was too large. It could even be described as hundreds of millions of li wide. To form such a dangerous zone in the starry sky, what kind of power was needed to create it? What's going on here? Zhuan asked the cultivator closest to him. When the cultivator heard Zhuan's question, he immediately became very reserved. However, he still replied respectfully, "Senior, you don't seem to be from the northern universe. The reason why this place is like this is because of the battle between Lord Brahma and a mysterious female cultivator." Hearing this, Zhuan revealed a look of understanding and continued, "I heard about this too. I heard that Lord Brahma went into seclusion after returning to Lord Brahma Palace. Where did that mysterious female cultivator go in the end? Do you know?" The cultivator shook his head and said, "I don't know either. That mysterious female cultivator disappeared after the battle. We don't even know where she came from." Zhuan nodded and looked at the dangerous zone ahead. He asked in a deep voice, "Do you have a map of the route through here?" Although with Zhuan's strength, this dangerous zone was not fatal to him, the starry sky whirlwinds inside could not be underestimated. Even if Zhuan was entangled in them, it would be extremely troublesome. He didn't want to enter and explore the route step by step, so he simply asked this person. He knew that with such a terrifying danger zone lying in front of him, most cultivators wouldn't be able to enter without a route map. He didn't believe that there was no route map. The cultivator said with trepidation, "Senior, I don't have a route map, but if you want a route map, you need to buy it there." As he spoke, the cultivator pointed behind him. There was a large starry sky meteorite in the place he pointed at. On the meteorite, there was a huge temple supported by huge white stone pillars. There were very few people in the huge temple, and Zhuan could see at a glance that there was an extremely powerful restriction array set up around the temple. Moreover, it was a level 7 array formation. It seemed that there was a level 7 array formation master overseeing this temple. After Zhuan threw a level 5 divine herb to the cultivator as a reward, he rushed towards the temple. Outside the temple, there were 2 arrogant-looking guards. However, with the arrival of Zhuan, the arrogance on their faces faded a little. After all, they could tell at a glance that Zhuan was a powerful void sky expert from his aura. "Sir, are you here to buy a route map?" one of the guards hurriedly asked. Zhuan nodded. He carefully looked at the level 7 array around the temple in front of him and found that the array was slightly rough. Obviously, the level of array formation that set up this array was much lower than his. However, he didn't care. He only wanted the route map and completed the transaction. "Yes, I should be able to go in," Zhuan said indifferently. The 2 guards nodded repeatedly and immediately opened the array formation to let Zhuan in. After Zhuan entered, he stepped into the temple. It had to be said that the number of people inside the temple was extremely desolate compared to the number of people outside. Moreover, most of the cultivators inside were void sky experts. Among them, Zhuan also saw many void sky 6th step experts. As soon as Zhuan entered the temple, a beautifully dressed maid walked over and said with a smile, "Senior, are you here to buy a route map of the dangerous zone ahead?" Zhuan nodded and didn't say anything. The maid smiled charmingly and said, "Senior, follow me." With that, the maid led Zhuan through the temple and arrived in front of the white jade counter in the middle of the temple. In front of the white jade counter stood a bored young girl in a green robe. Obviously, this young girl in a green robe was in charge of this counter. On top of the counter stood a man and a woman. At a glance, it was obvious that these 2 were Dao companions. However, this pair of Dao companions had conflicted expressions on their faces as if they were hesitating about something. The young girl in a green robe looked at the pair of Dao companions with disdain and said, "You 2 poor bastards. Since you don't have anything valuable to exchange, get lost. Don't even think about the route map." The pair of Dao companions were shocked and angry. The male cultivator stood up and said in a deep voice, "It's just a route map. What makes you think it's worth a level 7 divine pill?" Zhuan's eyes narrowed. He was also shocked by the price of this route map. As long as he had time, he could also enter the dangerous zone and draw a relatively safe route. However, it would take a lot of time, so he was too lazy to do it. Chapter 22-24. Conflict, you don't accept it? The girl in cyan robes narrowed her eyes and said coldly, "Husband, forget it. We can't afford to offend them. I think we'd better leave." The female cultivator pulled the male cultivator's sleeve and tried to persuade him. The male cultivator also realized the background of this temple. With a cold snort, he pulled the female cultivator away from the temple. "You want to leave? You shouted at me just now, and now you want to leave? Don't you want to compensate me with something first?" The girl in cyan robes sneered and gave a meaningful glance to the two black-robed men standing on the stone pillars on both sides. The two black-robed men blocked the path. Zhuan looked on coldly. He discovered that the two black-robed men's cultivation levels weren't weak. They were both in the Void Sky realm. Although the couple's cultivation levels were also in the Void Sky realm, they weren't very high. The male cultivator was only in the Void Sky realm, and the female cultivator was even worse. She was only in the Void Sky realm. In front of the two black-robed men who were in the Void Sky realm, the couple was simply insignificant. "What do you want? We don't plan to buy the route map, okay?" The female cultivator's face was deathly pale. She couldn't help but say in shock and anger, "It's not up to you to enter this temple. Either you buy the route map and leave, or you compensate for what happened just now with a level 5 divine pellet or something of equal value," the girl in cyan robes said with a cold smile. Yun, who was watching from the side, frowned slightly. This girl in cyan robes was really too black-hearted. Just now, the couple only said a few words and she actually wanted to compensate them with a level 5 divine pellet. This was simply extortion. "You're going too far. We can't take out a level 5 divine pellet at all." The male cultivator was so angry that his whole body trembled. They only entered the temple for the route map. Generally, the route map wouldn't be too expensive, but now he found that he'd entered the tiger's den. The girl in cyan robes was simply asking for a sky-high price. "You don't even have a level 5 divine pellet. As expected, you're poor. You two cripple this adulterous couple and throw them out so they don't embarrass themselves here," the girl in cyan robes said disdainfully. The two black-robed men clearly listened to the green-robed young lady's words. They nodded at her and planned to take the couple away. The pair of Taoist companions took out their divine artifacts to resist, but found that their divine sense was greatly weakened in this temple, and they were captured by the two black-robed men in just a few moments. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. The moment he saw the situation of this pair of Dao companions, he also discovered that the array formation in this temple had the effect of suppressing spiritual consciousness. In other words, all the cultivators who entered the temple would have their strength greatly reduced, allowing the cultivator controlling the temple to do as he pleased. However, Zhuowen's spiritual sense was too strong. Although the array had indeed suppressed a part of his spiritual sense, his spiritual sense was still stronger than an ordinary cultivator's. Just as the two black-robed men were about to cripple the couple, Zhuowen said, "They didn't do anything wrong. There's no need to cripple them, right?" Although Zhuowen wasn't a meddlesome person, the green-robed young lady and her companions had gone too far, so he didn't intend to stand by and watch. "Fellow Taoist, it's not up to you to judge our affairs." The green-robed young lady had already noticed Yun, especially when she discovered that Zhuowen's aura had reached the Void Sky 6 steps. Her attitude toward Zhuowen was much better than the couple's. However, it was clear that she didn't particularly give Zhuowen face. After all, she was very clear that in this temple, most of the cultivators who came in from the outside had their divine sense suppressed, so they couldn't display much of their strength. Of course, she wouldn't casually offend a powerhouse like the Void Sky 6 steps, so she didn't speak too harshly. Zhuowen took out a divine pill and tossed it to the green-robed young lady. "This is a blood-congealing chi-creating pill, a level 5 divine pill. I think this is enough compensation, right?" Zhuowen's current wealth was comparable to that of the 10 great sects. A mere level 5 divine pill was indeed not worth mentioning to him. Since he could save this pair of Taoist companions with just a lift of his hand, he naturally did not mind lending a hand. The green-robed young lady took the blood-congealing chi-creating pill and carefully examined it. She glanced at Zhuowen in surprise. Although a level 5 divine pill wasn't very precious to the Void Sky 6 steps, It was still far from the point of giving it away casually. Moreover, a level 5 divine pill had many uses. Even if they were friends, they might not necessarily take out such a divine pill to help. Not to mention this white-robed young man and the couple were complete strangers. Moreover, looking at the way this white-robed young man casually took out the blood-congealing chi-creating pill, it was as if this level 5 divine pill wasn't particularly precious to him. Clearly, this white-robed young man was extremely wealthy. The two black-robed men turned to look at the green-robed young lady. Clearly, they were waiting for her opinion. "Let these two go," the green-robed young lady said indifferently. The black-robed men released the couple, and the couple hurriedly came to Zhuowen's side. They said gratefully, "Thank you, senior, for saving us." Zhuowen waved his hand and walked to the counter. He looked at the green-robed young lady and said, "I need the route map of the dangerous zone." This is a level 7 divine pill. Zhuowen took out a sparkling and translucent pill and placed it on the counter. He looked at the green-robed young lady calmly. The green-robed young lady played with the level 7 divine pill in her jade-like hands. She was quite shocked. This white-robed young man took out a level 7 divine pill without even blinking. Clearly, this person was extremely wealthy. Thinking of this, the green-robed young lady smiled tenderly and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm really sorry. The price of this route map changes every time. It fluctuates. Just now, it was a level 7 divine pill. Now, it needs a level 8 divine pill. Of course, if fellow Taoist doesn't have a level 8 divine pill, you can take out 10 level 7 divine pills to exchange for the route map." Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. This green-robed young lady was really shameless. She actually dared to raise the price in front of him. This kind of behavior was completely untrustworthy. Actually, I'm not an unreasonable person. However, if someone is unreasonable to me, my usual method is to return an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. As Zhuowen spoke, he grabbed the level 7 divine pill that the green-robed young lady was playing with. Instantly, Zhuowen grabbed the level 7 divine pill in his hand. The green-robed young lady clearly didn't expect this white-robed young man to flip out first. She was stunned for a moment before she said coldly, "Fellow Taoist, are you trying to slander me? I'm not being unreasonable. I'm clearly stating the price. If you don't like it, then don't blame me for being impolite." As she spoke, the green-robed young lady gently clapped her hands. Instantly, black-robed men appeared in the deserted temple. There were more than 10 of them. Moreover, among these black-robed men, there were actually 2 Void Sky 5th stage cultivators. This green-robed young lady was very smart. Due to the great array in the temple, the Void Sky 6th stage cultivators who came in from the outside would be greatly weakened. They would probably be about the same as an ordinary Void Sky 5th stage cultivator. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.